Good evening, TNT family. We want to wish all our mothers happy Mother's Day, and in particular, our Honorable Prime Minister, which we are most fortunate at this time. And it's a real pleasure to wish her a happy Mother's Day and all the best for the next 5 years of growing our economy and all that good stuff. But I want to welcome Shadi to our program, and she's going to say a few words in reference to Mother's Day.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name, Mr. Mahabir said, my name is Shade. I'm the founder of the All Cancers Group TT, and from us to everyone who is listening, happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers and our Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bissessa. Such an amazing time that we have, women across the board this time in all leadership positions. So I just want to wish everyone a happy Mother's Day, even for the cancer survivors who are mothers as well, cancer patients right now. Happy Mother's Day to you all. Special mention to Miss Fazia's mother. Happy Mother's Day to her as well. And, I pray that she recovers and is comfortable where she is at the moment. So just wanted to bring awareness to an event that we are having on the 17th of May. We are 1 week away. It's a cancer care and mental health seminar hosted at the Oasis Garden Terrace, 101 Circular Road, San Fernando. We are having experts come on to talk about cancer care, mental health for cancer survivors, caregivers, all the supporters, family, friends. Come on out and get this information. We have food all day that is going to be served. The tickets only are $100. You get expert information from psychologists, surgeons, doctors, other survivors, as well coming together to share and to create a network and environment of encouragement and hope for this disease that has destroyed so many lives. And we also have massages on the day. We have professional massages. So come on out and enjoy a day from 8:30 a.m. in the morning to 3 p.m. with us and have a wonderful day. Thank you all so much for having me. I
Thank you very
appreciate
much,
it.
Shadi, for taking the time to join
Yes.
us. And I wish
Yes.
your mother also a happy Mother's Day and say hello to
Yes.
everyone
Thank you
for
so
us.
much. I
All
will.
right,
I will.
then. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
So, Mr. Singh,
Tell me what's going on, brother.
I'm looking at these economists in Trinidad and Tobago giving their views, and I'm
Be,
seeing a
be careful.
Mr.
Be careful. I'm an economist as well. So
Yeah, well, I
yeah,
see that there Mr. Dr. Anthony Gonzalez and
yes,
Dr. Roger Hussein,
yes.
and they were talking about government borrowing. But I'm looking at the difference here of 18.9 billion was spent in interest payments under PPG, right?
Yes.
With an average of 3.5 billion. And under the People's National Movement, we see from 2016 to 2023, we see 41.2 billion was spent.
Okay.
So we seen an average of 5.6 billion, 64% increase, 64% increase.
Oh, wow.
And we don't see nothing for volume. What we see is more arrogance and a lack of accountability. So being that you are an economist, sir, I would appreciate if you could give me and the audience a little introduction here on what you see in comparison what's taking place has taken place between PPG, the UNC PPG, and the PNM for the last 10 years. Knowing that the fact also, the difference I would say, for in my opinion, under the PPG, under Mrs. Bisesa, is they created revenue stream, right?
Yes. And
So so you just can't look at what they spent, but basically how much revenue stream was created under the PPG under Mrs. Visesa comparison to the PNM. So maybe if it's possible, you could give us a little education on what's taking place here.
okay. Let me start by saying it's always good to identify the amounts of, monies that were borrowed. What is you call it borrowed loans, debt, mortgage, it all amounts to the same thing. It's borrowings. And all borrowings had to be paid back. Now, the quantum of borrowings, let's say from 2010 to 2015, and the amounts thereafter in the other 5 years from 2016 to 2020, and 2024 up to 2025 last month, it's good to draw the comparison and see how much of that money was borrowed, one, but the amount of borrowings which are in foreign denominations, and that is a better yardstick to measure, because you can borrow money locally from banks and other financial institutions, and that is not so bad. But when you borrowing from international agencies, you have to pay back in foreign currency. And seeing
And
what,
the interest could possibly vary according to what I've learned from Vade, right?
yes, interest can vary widely. It depends on the source, which countries or which banks you're borrowing from, and so on. So borrowings by itself is not bad, but it has to do with what are you using that debt to produce. Are you using that debt to pay salaries, or are you using the debt to create capital improvements, infrastructure works, and so on? So it all depends on what you use, how do you use that debt. And you have to understand as well that, when are these debt maturing? When is it due for payment over the long term? Some that are like 10-year debts, some are 15 years, some are, at different time periods, 18 years, 20 years, like that. And most times you just pay interest on the debt. And finally you pay the large balloon principal. So those things have to be taken into consideration. When are those debts due, especially the foreign debts? Now, as I said, if the debt is used to build out infrastructure, build out roads, build schools, ECC centers, and so on, capital projects, then you will eventually have a return on your investment. So actually, you're borrowing money to make money, and you may not make physical money, but you can use that to create like institutions, to train people, to improve your capital stock, your capital HR capacity, and so on. So it as a more of an intangible asset you're getting, but it's still an asset. Now, when you take that to do, pie in the sky projects, when some of these that are done in secrecy, and there's very little information when you ask what is the debt used for, and only after the fact they tell you sometimes, like what happened last month in April. All of a sudden, when they announced the election, you see almost 1.5 billion in debt borrowings.
Exactly.
Does anybody know who those mortgages were for? Why was it used? That the media and so on informed the public around, hey, the government is taking a $350 million loan to upgrade the roads in a certain area. We were not apprised to that information. So we don't know what those loans are for. And I find it a bit scary to know that a lot of ministries are either at a zero balance in their votes, which is the amount of money allocated for them for a particular period. Normally it's a year, and then it's September. They don't have any monies right now in their votes. So how can they incur expenses to pay, the normal run-of-the-mill stuff which they need to buy? But more so, some ministries don't even have the money, but they have debt on top of that. They have unpaid bills. And in the case of the Ministry of Health, I read it was over 500 million they're owing. So these so-called shocking statements or revelations doesn't augur well going forward,
Well,
So,
for me, I would understand borrowing to invest and create revenue stream,
right.
but borrowing to spree, far as I more see under Dr. Rowley-led administration, more so than anything else. And that is the way I feel about this whole situation. And especially with the lack of accountability, seems to be. He's boasting about anti-corruption. He seems to be the most corrupted government because he cannot give account for the starting with the Auditor General with the $2.6 billion, right?
Correct.
And I mean, the two Coast Guard vessels they went and purchased, they wasn't clear on the actual price of this, and was it loan, was it grant? There's a lot of misinformation, so we need some clarity, and we could not get any clarity from him. He always trying to buff the reporters, you know. So I mean, and yet I feel like the media really didn't hold this government accountable. Now they're trying to jump on Mrs. Bissesa throat before she even got started. That's the way I see things. And some of them are trying to play, well, UNC and PNM is the same thing. There's a drastic difference between UNC and PNM. UNC creates revenue stream, much more revenue stream than PNM, and it's all its history. As
Yes.
far as I see.
It's always the rate of return. What are you getting back from your borrowings? And if you could show tangible returns, then that's good, because you could borrow to build out schools. And that is always a good thing once you can educate children. You can borrow to create infrastructure. You can, like highways and so on. But you need to say what it is for, what are the costs involved, hospitals,
I mean, but
airports.
investing in a highway could help generate your economy,
It is,
based
because
on,
in several
inviting, being enticing to investors.
in several ways, not only in the construction area, but once you do the highways and making, you're opening up accessible lands so that, factories and warehouses and businesses can tend to or set up shop along these areas, so that there's easy ingress and egress into the transportation network system. So it's brings it brings about some sort of progress in various locations. Not all areas along the highway can be used for that, but generally, once there's ingress and egress to inside out, get in and get out as quickly as possible, your transport costs and so on is impacted. So,
It's based a lot on how you strategize and design things. But I always see good, improvement in structure can always entice in, investors into your country. With you making things more accessible.
yeah, those two things really, that and your human capital, that is critical. So if you're borrowing to set up like educational institutions, let's say a higher learning, or like now, if they're borrowing to delve into technology and AI, you're borrowing money to do a data center, for example, in Trinidad, though the payback and so on will be, you know, they have a positive ROI, then let's put it like that, because the output of all of that is you having a cadre of technological as well as, AI personnel, which you can call upon now to drive your development um, growth goals, as well as to attract foreign investors into the country. Because people are glad to, big businesses are glad to know that you can have access to a ready workforce, and that is perhaps one of the main criteria why they go in search of you know countries or islands, as the case may be, that has stable governments and highly educated workforce.
Look, I'm seeing an article here with Dr. Fazal Ali. You might know him. And he's saying about cyber economics is a catalyst for economic growth. It is the economics of information and security, defense of critical infrastructure, including drilling platforms, power grids. I mean, you name it. I mean, I don't have to tell you. I mean, you name it. Yeah. So it is so critically important to invest in technology.
And now, as I mentioned our same program, but at a different time, that it's critical that we start collecting data in the format which you can use, because data is really the fuel, the fuel for AI. AI by itself is nothing. AI is like a computer. If there's no software in the
Well,
computer,
it's like a brain. You don't feed the brain, it shuts down, right?
yeah, it's the gasoline in the car. You're gonna have your big, Maybach, $2 million a vehicle, and you don't have gas if it's user gas, or you don't have electric batteries or what have you, it's useless. So the same is with data. Data has to be collected, data has to be sorted, data has to be cleaned, data has been manipulated through what's called structured query language, SQL. Data has to, be manipulated in such a way that you use it to solve problems, not only business problems, but you can solve cybersecurity problems. You can use it to facilitate banking and problems. You can use it to do e-commerce problems, digital marketing strategy problems. What do you think Amazon and Google and all these people want? They use the data that they have on you to market back to you. And the more information they collected about you, that data they collect about all these persons who use Google is worth more than the company itself. Can you imagine that? The data they have about clients and customers is worth more than the actual company. To tell you how powerful data is, because they take that data and sell it to other third parties after cleaning it up and so on. So it's like refining, think of it like an oil refinery. You import crude oil and you get finished products. And this is what data is. So it's without data, there is no AI.
Yes, Darren Ramchari, you're correct about the getting the refinery open, but we also have a multifaceted strategy. Refinery is one, but we have a lot of other resources we need to simultaneously work on and needs to be recognized and to be treated and in a fair way, and that we restructure how government um, conducts business with a lot of ease of business and not complications, and having your application sitting there when you apply to get a license or whatever it is that you're trying to get. There must be. We are looking for an ease of doing business with government, and ease of business doing business in the country. Improvement of customer service, whether you go to the bank or whatever it is that you're doing. We must focus on improving the quality of service delivery, regardless of what end it is. Go ahead,
Yes,
Mr. Singh.
that's it. I agree with you 100%, Gary. But the the thing is that nobody wants to wait 100 days or 200 days to get licenses to start a business in your island. They will go somewhere else that they can set up shop within a month or 2 weeks. And what is it that takes that long
They give
to?
for especially with foreign people trying um to do business in Trinidad. It's so much. Also, they are frustrated. I'll give you an example. When Shah Rukh Khan tried to land his private jet, he took a private jet to Trinidad for the cricket about a year or two ago. He had a very hard time getting the authorization to come into Trinidad with the jet.
Yeah.
That was one of the issues I discovered. Don't ask me how I know. But I'm just
Well,
saying simple
I
things like that.
not
they
only
they
shall.
they're dragging. They're always dragging. It's like what they want. You have to grease everybody to get everything. Get something done. They're not moving. So this nonsense had to cut out.
Yes, and it's the ease of doing business. The minister who in charge, I guess, or the new Mr. Maraj, I think, the new Minister of Trade and Investment and Tourism. I think he needs to look at that and see how we can circumvent the processes and
You don't,
get
yeah,
it
Mr.
going.
Kamamaraji.
Yeah, get it going within a short.
If there's one person who knows how to get the job done, is Mr. Kamamaraj. I mean,
Yeah,
he has a
yeah.
reputation, and he has the connection to flow with it.
And you need to, if you have to get legislation implemented, it has to be a coordinated effort among interministerial team. And that is what we have been saying since, in fact, for the past couple of weeks, that any development happening in Trinidad has to be run and coordinated via an interministerial team. And that team should be, the composition of that team should really be specialists or technical officers in various fields like QS quantity surveyors. You must have a financial person. You must have project managers. And let any project that is going to be implemented, especially like what's been outlined in the growth polls, let that always flow through this implementation team. So what's happening is that you're developing a cadre of skilled personnel who can handle projects.
But there has to be, with all the skills, Mr. Singh, the attitude has to change. There has to be an attitude adjustment on how we go about things, in the general approach,
Agreed,
the
agreed,
motivation.
agreed. But these people, I will prefer that they come from private enterprise, because to get around that exact problem that you just mentioned. Because working in the public service, there is really no, I will say there's no requirement to push things on and get it done within certain timelines and
We
within
might even have
budgets.
to hire a company to work on the customer service policy and training, and how and which way we want. There must be some kind of training. There has to be stipulation on conditions and how we want the job done. Not just do the job, but we want it done in a certain way.
Yes. So but guys in private sector are more, focused on meeting strict deadlines and doing a lot of gap analysis so we see where the bottlenecking is occurring and how to get past that. So that's what I say. It's unless you have really good public servants who know their stuff, you want to eliminate the biases which those officers may be accustomed to doing, so that, hey, cost of overrun is nothing, that's taxpayers' money, they can go with that. All of our projects have cost overruns, so they're not driven by the concept of getting things done on time and within budget. Very, very few of them. And that is why you see like all these projects, even done, all these soft opening projects have big cost overruns. Tobago Airport project, the Shell there had $450 million overrun on a $1 billion project. What is that? That's
But one of the things I experienced in doing simple home projects is that people demand big money. They don't show up for work. They take your money. They show up on another job, and it's a kind of attitude and culture where they just do what they want, but they demand the money. You have to pay the money, and then they don't want to show up to work. So all these kind of things, I mean, I can understand that causes on a larger scale more problems.
Well, that is why your quantity surveyors, is important to tell her, hey, you know what? After this first month, you were supposed to do 20% of the job. Okay, but you only did 12%. Why should I pay you 20% of the project cost? So this is the thing. You got to hold, contractors and your workforce accountable for delivery. So that's why I was saying that you need to have that cadre of skilled project managers, quantity surveyors, financial controllers. People know how to negotiate, because negotiating is a big thing. Purchasing agents and so on. You need to have these specialized people. And don't go with, oh, my friend has a big hardware there, let's buy stuff there. No, those things don't work like that, my friend. So once you have that cadre of skilled people within an interministerial team, then you could tackle any sort of development project, because you will have learned over time what are the constraints you face at any given point. So you want to move from point A to point B, you will definitely encounter problems. Then you move from point B to point C, you will get problems as well. But let's say you're doing projects over 2 years. Wouldn't you have learned?
Darren has a question of how can we create an ease of doing business if we don't have foreign exchange? First of all, Darren, you have to restructure the composition of your management. This is what we're talking about. The attitude and the flow of business. When you try to apply to do whatever it is through the government, the attitude, the processing has to be a lot easier than how it is, and not put aside with your application, whatever you're trying to do. And it boils down just to the ordinary citizen. Whether you're going to license office, you're applying for a birth certificate, you're trying to get your ID card, or whether you're trying to get a business license to open your business, you're trying to import something, you transition through the airport, going to the hospital. This is all what we're talking about in reference to ease of doing business. Citizens have too much of a hard time getting the simplest things done. The simplest things I see in the country has been so complicated. And this is, these are things that I'm looking forward to see upgraded.
Can we have a one-stop shop for that, Gary?
You would have to have. There would have to be some training on getting that done.
Correct.
You have to set up a management training team, for that. Like you say, like yourself as a contractor. Okay, so this is how we want things done. You do the training process. You could even use your AI technology to create some kind of, module then, to say that how we going about doing this thing, and
Yes.
all that could come in handy.
Yeah, but I'm talking, the question was to how we can improve the ease of doing business, right?
Right, but he's talking about how you do it without foreign exchange.
You,
Foreign exchange has nothing to do with that.
nothing,
The foreign exchange, wait, the foreign exchange will come
coming, correct.
in, but the first thing we have to fix, if you're going to start a business, we have to train our employees. Basically, let's break it down to this. You have to train the employees. You have to have a strategy in how you're going to do your business, right? And how you're going to treat the customers, and how you're going to keep say you're running a supermarket, how you're going to maintain the supermarket, and things like that. How you're going to process the goods, and all these different things you have to work out. So you have to plan all these things, and then the revenue stream starts to come. No, there's a few things that we have to work on the way I see it. I mean, the oil refinery is one, but we have a lot of other resources that we need to work on. We need to make it possible for the ordinary man, if he wants to export his produce outside the country, we must give him the support. Like I myself outside here could try to give him some how to say, some contacts, and promote his business. But I'm asking TNT National across the country, outside the country, to work with us in promoting our food products, which we do. We are very happy. We're very proud. We are people are very proud of our culture and our food. So it's nothing difficult for us to do. We have a lot of people opening up their roti shops and different things across the USA and various parts of the world, Canada and whatever. So the Matux pepper sauce, the different products from TNT. I mean, I left there a while. I can't remember everything, but the goods and services that are produced in TNT, we want to be able to try and assist in promoting that.
And
Go ahead.
that is, you hit it on the head, and that is what I was telling you. If we can borrow funds when you take out a loan, and we use that loan productively, as I told you, education, to develop a cadre of skilled people. So
Yeah,
that
education is an investment.
so
It is
that
an investment. Yeah.
when a potential employer or potential company from, let's say, the US or Canada wants to come to Trinidad, they say, the first thing, do I have a labor force there who can work my factory for me? Okay, the answer is yes. Do I have, where can I apply to you go to the Ministry of Trade. There's a separate office. It's like a one-stop shop. This is the requirements of it. You can fill out your application online and you will get a response within a week. Okay? Are there any legal implications? What about when I make money and I set up my factory? What sort of repatriation of my monies? Can I take back my money to Canada or the US, as the case may be? Do I have to leave a percentage in Trinidad? What is the formula? You see, all these things have to work out, and certain legislation has to be formed or implemented to guide the policy. Remember, in anything, any sort of ministries, activity, you must have certain things. I'll tell you that.
Well, first of all, we needed a government for the people, and we finally got that government for the people. And so we will have to give this government a little time to settle in and get things going. In the meantime, we're making our suggestions and recommendations to enhance the ideas, and this is why I keep calling on our citizens to come on board, and participating in making all this effort, because it's for all of us to benefit. We had a government that was strangling us. We had a government with their knee on our necks, and they were twisting around their knee on our necks, and they give themselves a big fat raise on the exit. And nobody's getting on Dr. Rowley's case with that. They're getting on Mrs. Bisesa case. No.
If you can rescind that agreement. That's a question I think was posed last week. Can you rescind?
Yeah, I mean, no, that wasn't a bad question at the same point, but I mean, because a lot of people are very anxious with that. But the whole fact that he wanted her, is like to do everything, have all the answers for him right away, and which I know a lot of us would like to see that rule that was passed and by the SRC to be rescinded. But I like to think that any law that make my man can be rescinded except God law. So the Prime Minister will look at it, but as far as she knows legally,
It
she cannot do that.
Yeah, correct.
So, but we have to focus on growing the economy, creating that revenue stream, in any which way possible. And I always feel that a lot of our resources and people and ideas got overlooked for over the years. And
No,
if we incorporate these together with whatever resources that we have, in the industrial area, we can really boost our economy.
yeah, it has to be an integrated approach. Definitely be an integrated approach. You cannot work in silos with these things. I was reading in the newspaper today the situation with energy, and Guyana says, wait. We have plans for oil and gas. So, okay, if there are plans for oil and gas, statements were made in the public domain that we're going to approach Guyana, Suriname, and Grenada, and also to drill, explore natural gas and so on off the coast of Tobago. So, what happens in these cases where statements are made like that, but no prior negotiations have taken place with Guyana per se? So here is it. I think it's the vice president saying that they have their own plans for their oil and natural gas.
Well, right now, I find he's acting kind of cocky and his head is a little bit too swollen. It's not like they needed Trinidad, no, because they kind of got swollen with the resources that they have there. But we will work around that.
Yes, and there are other countries as well. I mean, you want to open a refinery, that is good. There are a lot of byproducts you can use and sell from the refinery to generate foreign exchange. It will require high, capital input. So I think an oil refinery, I don't think they should have much problem trying to secure foreign capital to resuscitate an industry like that, because I think banks and so on will view that as an income generating, was a good source of revenue collection in the long run. So I don't think there'll be a problem sourcing funding and capital to go ahead and resuscitate the oil industry.
I know it's a definite goal. It's just a matter of time that we get in there and looking at the infrastructure and things like that. And I mean, we have the people who knows how to do the job. It's not like we don't have the people who has the know-how. They're all there, and we have the people who knows how to work outside to market our country and product from on the outside. So we have all the right professionals in place with the right attitude and the right energy. I see so far, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, the dynamics and all of these things are changing over time, and it's more so in today's environment. Marketing really is not what it used to be.
Welcome, Dr. Rambo. Yeah.
Hi. How are you doing?
How are you, Doc?
I'm fine.
Yeah, so the whole concept of marketing has changed big time, and we have to take lessons from the big guys, how it's changing. Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Amazon, all these people, when you look at it, their marketing now is not the traditional marketing we grew up in and which we were taught in our MBA programs and so on. It has all shifted. A lot of things had gone digital. Selling, they no longer need storefronts to sell. Buy and purchase and sell on your phone, on Facebook Marketplace, on TikTok, on Instagram, and so on. So the marketplace where transactions take place now are not the traditional sources. You have funds in an account, you transfer funds on the fly. You don't have to go on the bank and get, a wire transfer.
Exactly.
These
exactly.
things.
Exactly.
businesses have changed, and that marketing has changed as well.
Which brings me to the Prime Minister. Don't have to be in Port of Spain and Whitehall to operate. All right.
And
So
you're quite right. You're going to operate out of Tobago at Blenheim, where the Prime Minister's official residence is located.
right, she's going to be fully engaged with the population. She's going to be
Yeah.
accessible with decentralizing herself, and that's
Yes.
such an excellent idea. So you know, you see the vast difference between PNM and UNC is that we have the know-how to get the job done. You
And
know, we go
not
ahead.
only that, there's a lot of the country beyond the lighthouse.
Yeah, this is not government for Port of Spain by Port of Spain anymore. It's government
Yes.
for the people. So the Prime Minister will be accessible in various parts of the country to address the issues going forward.
I wish they do consider, given the situation with traffic. I don't know if you have been to Trinidad lately, you know, the south to north traffic in the morning.
Well, that congestion in Central there where Rohan created and taking years to finish. That little piece of construction, right? And big set of money, creating all kind of clutter right in what they call that area there, Chase Village, right? Unnecessarily.
Yeah, but in addition to that, that may be a reason. But you know, again, everything is the data, Gary. Everything is data driven. Do we have an idea how many people travel from south to north every morning to work in Port of Spain? If we have
Well, you
that
know,
figure, have we
I am, yeah, I am saying, I know I did mention that we need to decentralize things.
Okay.
You know, and Mrs. Bisesa, by her conduct, already she already is heading in that direction by decentralizing herself. We need to decentralize other government offices to deal with this clutter. And maybe somewhere down the line, we could put in back some train, you know, like a transit system where you can hop on a transit and head into whether it's Port of Spain, San Fernando, or you're going Sandy Grande, and within 20 minutes or so, you get if you were to get an air conditioned transit train, right, with Wi-Fi and an easy drive and no traffic, just to hop in and out. You gotta park and ride. So you park by the Bird Sanctuary in
Yeah,
Caroni there,
yeah,
or
yeah,
down in San Fernando, you park wherever the you know the area is down there. I don't know the area too good, maybe the waterfront or somewhere there, and you have the options: the water taxi or the transit, right?
yeah.
And
Right.
easy access. So I
That's
mean, there's a lot of infrastructure to be built out. We have the ideas, we have you know about doing these things, but the people have to you know to keep voting and sticking with us, and we will do our best to service them.
Is there any ministry head office in San Fernando or Chaguanas or Cuba or anywhere along the
I
highway
have no
to give
I have
access
no.
to the people coming from south in the morning, so we will not have that big backlog from long before Freeport and at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning?
A lot of government office has to be decentralized. You know, I'm saying create before we create a multi-purpose government business. You know, we should look at what we have right now and create several sub office for the Ministry of Legal Affairs, several sub office for the Ministry of National Security, several sub office for Ministry of Health and Social Development. Sandy Grande should have one. I mean, Arima, I think, you know, the area there, Toko, what do you call it? Not Toko,
Rio Claro for the
yeah,
southeast
Mayaro side, Rio Claro,
and
you know,
central
and
Princess
I mean, the people
Town.
from all Point and the Cacas, how far should they have to go all the way into Port of Spain? You know what I mean? It's
That's what
ridiculous.
that is why I asked you if, as any survey at all was done, how many public servants live down south and have to traverse or use the
Well,
highways to get up.
I'm not aware of it, but I'm just
And
saying, you
that
know, as
and
far as common sense is, to me, you know, it is more sense for us, you know, to do these things. They're talking about reduction of the amount of cars in the country. But number one, the roads were bad. They did not build any new highways with all this money. You see the large sum of money that we've seen here so far. They couldn't finish what was there. And their whole strategy of operation where they want to force everybody into Port of Spain
Right.
unnecessarily.
And that's what I'm getting at. It takes it. You spend 5 hours a day in traffic to get there from
So
south
we
to north.
need a lot of the sub office.
Whereas if you can calculate the cost to the country with that 5 hours of productive labor. Now, say you live in
the immigration building in San Fernando. How old is that? 100 years?
It's closed. It's no longer functional. That's a rented.
I know. I recently heard it closed, but how old is that? And I hate to see the one other parts of the country. I mean, it is so. I mean, these guys have raped the country and kept everything in such a primitive state. It's totally unacceptable.
So if you decentralize and you have pockets in today's world, you don't really need to be in office. At Port of Spain to do a job. You could do it out of San Fernando, out of the suburbs of San Fernando.
Come on, man. We're not using smoke signal anymore.
Let the public servants report to an office in San Fernando as a worst case scenario. If you can't, then
just like how the Prime Minister is doing it, and remote. Some people can work remotely, also with the technology, right?
Yes, and the nice thing there is software to measure your work. Don't feel you sit down home and get up and leave when you wish to get up and leave. No. The software is your camera is on you all the time. Your software is on you to measure your internet.
Yeah, everything you're doing is uploaded. It's not to say
it's not like, hey, the little baby is crying out, so let me go and take care of him. No, it's not going to be like that. Because you've been monitored, and then a lot more work can be done. Because let's say
anything
you want to work.
You don't have to be the traffic. You're more physically capable
in this area.
Absolutely. So this is the thing. Your productivity increases big time. You can work in the night. If you have a
you get a lot more production because you're not that stressed unnecessarily.
That's what I'm saying. Your productivity increases. You can work in the night quietly in your home, and once you get the job done, because things like payroll and so on, that requires a lot of more concentration when you're doing it. You can do that in the morning time. You can do it while you're traveling. All these things, and the productivity will definitely increase. And then the savings to the country in time lost in traffic, that's a biggie. That's the biggest hindrance. And the cost to both the worker and to the country as well. So,
Dr. Ramro, feel free to jump in whenever you.
Not to mention the risk on the road and flooding while it rainfalls, certain areas of the highway gets water, then all these things can be eliminated or avoided to a large extent.
Yeah, good thing. See, the problem is if we go to Jamaica and we're driving from Kingston to Ocho Rios, right?
Across.
We passed through a highway that was, two highways. One was recently built by the Chinese, and the other one was built by the Dutch. And it's a beautiful highway, well maintained, and it's because they charge tolls. The tolls are automatic, like what you have on the 407 and some of the roads in Florida, right? Okay.
Yeah.
The turnpike, yes, so you don't have to come out now and go to a booth and pay. Before, when we used to use the turnpike, we used to have to go and pay.
Like what they have here, you have your sticker in your car.
So everything is automatic. Yeah. And what it is that it will create a need for people who are using that highway every day to probably carpool, right? And as Gary was talking about, you can create alternative routes. In Ecuador, when I visited Ecuador, we had the same problem in Ecuador where it was so much traffic with such a small area and cars. You know what they did? They created a bus a bus lane, similar to what you have in Canada, where you have the 4-passenger lane, where if you are snapshot on that, they send you an automatic charge, so that
Yeah.
you can only use that when you have a family or more, right? So
Yeah.
you have that lane from Port of Spain to San Fernando will only be for buses, right? And when you are now using your vehicle on the North-South Highway or the East-West Highway, every time you use it, you pay a toll, and it goes automatically to your account. So, which means, therefore, that if you use it plenty, and if you could carpool with 3 people working in Port of Spain, you know what I mean? And then you create, as you said, these parking lots where you can use them. Once you have like a bus ticket, right? The ticket becomes your parking stub, and you use that when you go in, so you can park your car because it's all part of one cost. You understand?
Correct.
So these are things that the government needs to think out of the box, really. If you're driving from Gatwick to Heathrow, many
Yes.
people who land in Gatwick and they have to drive across to Heathrow, you will notice that when you go on the highway, there's some signs on the top, electronic signs that says 30 kilometers per hour, and you wonder to yourself, well, why the hell am I driving at 30 and the road is clear in front of me? The reason for that is that the AI starts calculating the speed, so that you don't have a backup further up. So what it does is that when a man comes on San Fernando Highway in Davie and he drives now at 120, 130, and he speeds up, then he has to slow down at Freeport. You see, but if he starts now at 30, 40, right, from there, and he's charged if he goes beyond that on his ticket when he goes home, then he will control the speed at 30, 40. And then what you will have now is a smoother flow of traffic into town, because you start keeping the speed down lower. So a man wouldn't just drive at 140 and all of a sudden comes to 10 or 15. He drives a steady speed of 30, 50, 40. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
this is science. It's there already. And I mean, obviously people get worried about when you start charging tolls, then the population will make a fuss and they say, oh my God, and then you think you will lose the next election. But some decisions are hard decisions that if you really want to cut down on the I mean, you're talking about streamlining, and what you're talking about working from home and whatnot. As I said, I mean, my daughters are in Canada, and I have 2 daughters. They work. One of them is a vice president of a big company. And 3 days of the week, she goes to work physically, and 2 days they work virtually. The other one works virtually 3 days a week and 2 days in the company. And I mean, they have been working like that since after COVID. The thing about it is that their productivity is higher. They obviously are able to do more sometimes without having to travel a whole 3 or 4 hours in traffic. You understand? So they optimize their time, because most of the work now is on a computer trying to jiggle around figures, because that's what it is. If it's digging a drain, and if it's sitting down and giving somebody an injection in the hand, it's a different job. You can't do that online. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, certain types of work and certain types of work in certain ministries, obviously, you benefit by that. And of course, you cut down on a number of things. Physical space becomes even better. In cramped spaces, your OSHA regulations, you might be able, instead of having 10 people packed in one office, then you can have 5, you know what I mean, as you rotate them. So even health and safety and OSHA regulations is even better. So public administration clearly have to sit down with AI, and I think it's a good thing that the Honorable Prime Minister probably joined them both there. I mean, we both agree on that, Mr. Singh. And I think
Yes.
that it's clearly that, I mean, what you're saying there, the problem is that they will have to think out of the box, and they will have to sit down. I mean, as I said, I've seen this strategy in Ecuador, and it works. Think about coming up to the highway and you sit down in a bus from San Fernando to Port of Spain, and you're on the left lane, extreme left, and you're going up the road, and you don't have any traffic, because that's a specific bus lane.
It's
Anybody
all done
caught
here.
anybody
Yeah.
caught on that bus lane, they will be charged
Yeah.
immediately. You know what I
It's
mean?
Air
buses.
condition, you got Wi-Fi, you could
Oh
continue
yeah.
working, you could talk to your family. I mean,
Yeah.
eventually we could build a transit system. But what I was proposing, Dr. Rambopel, Mr. Singh, is that we could go when we get the money, because that would be somewhere down the line, because the PNM eat up the money already. So when we get the money, a future planned project would be to go along the Gulf, go over the Carney Strap, and
The
straight into
causeway.
City Gate.
Yeah. As I said,
Sit in
you need to build a causeway, just like in
straight into
Manzanilla.
City Gate.
Three causeways. Three. One from Caroni, go right across to Port of Spain there, rest in front of the Hyatt. A lovely causeway going right down to down the islands there on the right hand side. So you have exits coming out to Diego Martin, Movie Town, Port of Spain, right, and City Gate. And then you have another causeway in Manzanilla going right across so that underneath you have beautiful spaces where you can catch fish and everything on top. You have a beautiful lookout. And the other
Right.
causeway is in by the creek, Mosquito Creek. You have to
Yeah.
go over that whole area there now, and that everything run that road is going to be destroyed. I mean, you cannot have a natural water catchment area, right, and a water course being blocked by an artificial highway. The highway is going to sink. That is swamp.
It's supposed to be above. It has
It's
to be
gonna
above.
sink. It's gonna sink. They're blocking the water. They're blocking the ecosystem there. So they have to go above. You have to build a bridge right over. And if they had done that all now, it would not. You would have had a beautiful highway, and you wouldn't have wasted so much money there.
I was
You know?
trying to propose this to the Minister of Works, and he didn't want to listen at the time,
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
Well, money,
that's
fast money.
nothing
You
new.
see, a
That,
causeway is plenty money over many years. You see, it's not a 5 year project. But if you see the beautiful highways these Dutch people built in Jamaica, beautiful highways. I mean, I'm talking about causeways that go over huge valleys. You know what I mean, right?
but you see it in Florida, you see it in Louisiana. I mean, you see
Yeah,
how these things are built.
uh,
Um, one of the ideas I came up with also is you guys. I'm sure you guys have been to that Baltimore harbor where all the restaurants are.
yeah.
yes,
But
yes.
So those are
Yeah,
one of
you
the
see
things
it.
that I was
You see it in
proposing.
Europe. You see it in Holland. I mean, you see it in other countries,
But
in
that's
China,
tourist attraction.
in Beijing. I mean, yeah, listen, that waterfront could be a beautiful waterfront with a lovely causeway going right down, lights and everything. Nice restaurants on top there. You know what I mean? And it eases up your traffic.
I
And
hope
we're
that
gonna have to deal with this traffic.
I hope the development plan of San Fernando West, that on the coastline there, will incorporate some of those ideas. In fact, I was thinking of to decentralize a lot of government offices into one massive, you
We
know.
have to decentralize it across the country, right? So
Well, yes,
there's some structures that we could already use, right?
yeah,
That's there. Like you said, the low hanging fruit, right? So right now we could do a lot of decentralization and that will you're minimizing stress, traffic pollution, time. I mean a lot of things. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and as I said, quicker. Like if you look at some quick wins, as I said, the Ecuador strategy with the bus on either side. I mean, putting the train in the middle like you have in New York, going down to JFK. I mean, that's a good idea, but it'll take some time. I think the bus, the extra lane, right? The tolls, right? I mean, you have to bite hard a bit. It might be hard for people, but you make it reasonable. You start with about $1 or $5 or something. You know what I mean? Something reasonable, and every time you go on, you pay. And if a man really realizes that he has to fork out another $100 a month or 150, for some people that's a lot. And they might say, okay, you know what? Hey, let me carpool. There's five of us going to Port of Spain every morning at 8 o'clock. You know what I mean? That combined with people working home, at least half the office can work from home 2 days a week. The other half, it cuts down on the number of people. You understand? So when you start combining some of these strategies, right, with the extra bus lane, you might be able to mitigate some of it over a period of time. And in the meantime, you look at getting the Dutch or the Chinese, to come and do the feasibility study for the causeway. To go on the causeway is something that is a 5-10 year project, 15 year, probably even 20-25 year project. But the thing is, it has to start, and here is where a government like this, with all of those bright young people, they will have a legacy. When they leave government in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they'll say to themselves, hey, man, you know what? I was part of building that causeway. Because Trinidad and Tobago will have to sit down really and look at these long term high impact projects.
Well,
yeah,
I'm looking to help give the people of Trinidad a government that they cannot refuse in the sense that, the next time around, that we all pitch in, make sure that the service delivery of this government, is superficial, that the people would say, nah, I ain't going back. You know, this is what I'm hoping. And some people can reason with, but I'm hoping that we reason with enough people so that we can stay in government, maintain the course, and keep advancing the level of service delivery towards our people.
Yeah.
You
But
know, these are
our
the
our biggest problem, Gary, will be us ourselves in terms of
which we
our
have
own
seen. We
people.
have seen. We have
Yeah,
seen.
our own people. I mean, as I said, I've been very, very integral in the last UNC government, the People's Partnership. The one before, again, I helped a lot. In fact, I don't know if you know, when Weedmark under Pandey came out with a card that was used for all the UNC members who had the party card with the Bastille Pandey picture on it. I don't know if you remember that card. um, Wade Mark had suggested a discount at some of the doctors' offices, So everybody who was a member of the party, they presented a card and they would have gotten a 20-30% discount. Now, these are things that now, when we look on the other end of it, this is where UNC needs now to build a party. It was one of the grouses that I had when I sort of had a kind of push back when I kind of stayed away from the party after the last internal elections when I went with Vasan. And part of it is that we need to now strengthen that party. UNC can no longer be a party that comes together when there's an election. You see, we must now institutionalize the party, and some of these where we can give incentives to some of the people who came out to us, right? I mean, there are plenty doctors, for example, clinics. For example, look at Movie Town. You know what I mean? You saw Movie Town, and the guy from Movie Town, Derek Chin. He has been a big supporter of the Honorable Prime Minister. So, like, people can get like little 10% discounts if they take their family to see a movie and all of these things. Some of these are very, very easy to achieve, and you could start looking at that with nurses, for example, who do a lot for the country, doctors who are in emergency departments, where they get a little incentive to go to some of our UNC affiliated stores,
Business, oh yeah,
you know
owner business, yeah.
right.
I mean,
So
even with my phone company here,
yeah.
I'm always getting these coupons and
Right.
referrals and
So I
money
think that
saving
I think
ventures.
yeah. So this is what I when you wanna win an election for another 10 years, you want to be like PNM, because if you go now and under, let us say, this girl Penny, right? Let us say Penny now starts to go. She looked today. She went and she visited the Siparia festival for the Saints, right? And she was there. I didn't see any UNC politicians in the news. I saw Penny, right? So when you start looking at that now and you say to yourself, okay, Penny starts doing that over the next 5 years, and she now mobilizes her PNM team. Now, the thing about how the elections and the numbers are in Trinidad, and you saw that in the last election where UNC lost, right? They did very good. UNC was very a high performing government. I mean, they had some issues, but the point about it is that they were a high performance government. But performance didn't beat Old Talk then. So when this girl brings out her PNM people to vote, and you get back that 100,000 to come back and vote, of
Correct.
course, in the next 5 years, after 2030, it might be all different in terms of the Gen Zs and whoever going to vote. But still, if she can mobilize that 100,000 to come back, and then some of the other parties realize that it doesn't make sense having a third party, they don't have money to finance, and everybody sort of merges now, and you just have two party, right? What you will find is PNM could very well come and win just because of the numbers of people, even though UNC performs well. So we need to begin now for party development. In other words, then, okay, you won. So what you want to do now is you want to keep those people happy, because part of the problem is that UNC supporters who are not getting board positions and they're not getting big jobs, and the government doesn't have the money to go and give everybody a 10%, and that's just a small portion of the UNC supporters. That's just the public service who are looking for their 10%. Right? There were a bigger number of 200,000 people who are outside there who are not the public servants. Right? They're not going to be on board positions. They're not going to be flying the Cal Airway to go to here and here. They're not going to be traveling. These are diehard hard supporters who would have to come out and vote in the next, in 2020, 30, and they are the ones who, if you don't just diss them or pass them straight, or you don't give them something, they're gonna get annoyed, and they're not gonna see the real benefits, that some of us will see. So I think that the party itself, Natex, and we'll have to now sit down now that you have won the election, start to do some of that institutional strengthening, right, of the party itself, and give these little incentives that they can negotiate now that they are ministers. They can, or MPs who are ministers, they could pick up the phone and they could call somebody and say, hey guy, I see you have a big road contract from billions of dollars over the past 10 years. You know what I mean? Hey, it's not bribery. You could declare it, but it's a way of giving back to your people. You understand? So I'm hoping that somehow, I don't know if anybody's going to be listening to us, but just by saying these things, and we're not being disrespectful, we're not telling you that, hey, we're asking you to do this or we're telling you to do this. Yeah, you might have your own ideas, but these are some good ideas, and if you want to listen to us, I'm hoping that you do.
Well, we have a good following here, for the short space that this we've been doing this. We have a good following here,
Yeah.
and we do get quite a number of views.
Right. Great.
So,
That's
the
nice.
information, let me see. I think I have about 1,600 subscription
Well, look
right
at
now.
that. I'm blind to it. Huh? When I join, I don't see
Yes,
anything.
we don't see that. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I postulated the same scenario, Dr. Ramu, last
Yeah.
week as well.
Yeah.
On TikTok, my TikTok is about 5,000 followers and 6,800 something likes or something like that.
Right. Right.
That's interesting,
Yeah.
Gary. I don't see those figures, but that's a metric you can measure to know how, if it
Yeah,
Yeah.
goes.
and I'm looking at the TikTok now. So I have 5,868 direct followers.
Wow.
I have 68,800, no, 68,800,
Well,
68,000, 68,800 likes.
Right.
oh, okay.
That is on TikTok.
Okay.
And then the information goes to, it is circulated on Facebook and, all these different things.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
that's a right.
You see, the intent is really, a discussion, a recommendation. Some people think a lot of these ideas are pie in the sky. In other words, and it's like these people who are not engineers, and they'll say, "Oh my God, you're not a politician." One, two, you're not an engineer. You're not a civil engineer. You're just a doctor, or you're just a retired, businessman or retired engineer or whatever. But you don't know what's happening in modern day. When I sit in the ministry, this is what I'm meeting. So sometimes, when you are sitting like some of us who have been there before, yes, what is happening now is, yes, I guess I agree. It's not as when we were there, but the principles remain the same. There are certain things that you would have to understand in the ministry that people will want to, as they say, pull wool over your eyes, kind of thing. They would want to make you feel that everything is perfect, and you get caught up into that perfection, that everything is running good. We are, hey, we have this and we have this and all of this. But when you won the election, because they lost it, and some of it, although they're saying it's so perfect, they're so good at coming to you and telling you that that everything is
But
hunky dory.
something, Dr. Ramro,
Yeah.
also the propaganda from the PNM um, was so strong that they convinced the former governor of New York that Kamala Prasad-Bisesa government was discriminating against African people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is why Governor Patterson come and talk the nonsense that he did,
Yeah.
which was totally the opposite, right?
Yeah.
And then they spread this propaganda that we were discriminating in how we deploy our services.
Yeah.
And when you see Dr. Gopi Singh come back with the report of the schools and the development and um, how much they repair and stuff like that, it was very factual. But then who did you convince those ordinary voters on the ground? Them don't they
Yeah.
believe they buy into the propaganda?
Yeah. Well, it's juicy, and Trinidad and Tobago has always been a lahi kind of a
But that
population that
spread all the way
like
up to New York here.
yeah, they like the little commerce, as they say. So it actually is more interesting to follow the commerce, and that's why TikTok will sway a lot of Trinidadians, mostly because of the fake news and the AI sort of generation of images that are false, and you have to now verify a lot of those AI postings. But it's good. I'm very hopeful. A week has gone, and I feel the country. You guys are not in Trinidad, but there's a sort of calm about the country. I mean, today was Sunday, Mother's Day, and even somebody next to me, we went to a Mother's Day function by one of my relatives, and we were at a poolside relaxing and making a little cook there, and someone remarked, you don't find the places so peaceful, and there's a calm about it. So I think that I think it is. I mean, even when I go to my office and I go down to the mall and whatever, you can see that there is a sense of hope, a sense of anticipation, and I think that the leaders that we have selected are a good bunch of persons. I think there's a lot of competencies and skills in that team. I do have confidence that they will be able to take it forward. I mean, I'm seeing things. They are sitting as they're teaching, as they're going through the teaching period and learning. You'll find some mistakes, like we saw Sobers might have just made an error, like he did with Raya, I think. So there would be some
We're talking about
comments.
with Antigua.
Yes, yes,
No, well, first of all, I don't think so, Doug.
yeah.
I think the Antigua Prime
The,
Minister was
the,
showing his red T-shirt. There were
okay,
some of
okay.
these
Yeah. He blew it
Caribbean
out of
countries are
proportion.
PNM loyalists, and they're
Okay,
looking to attack our party. I mean,
right,
Sobers had a right to be
right,
concerned about our citizens. First of all, he represents the TNT
right,
nationals, and
right.
if he find there was an issue, he have a right to call it out. But
So
they
I
get
guess
so
I guess
offended.
that's what I am. That's what I'm talking about. There, because of the when you go into these ministries now, right, and the fact that we have no cell phone policy in a lot of our ministries, right, you would find that like you would be saying things and they would sort of they would because of like using the Antigua issue with Sobas for an example. What he says might be totally correct or it will be correct, but the way now they're going to blow
They
it out of
spin it. They
proportion, right?
spin it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So this is where we are saying now sometimes your wording and the way that you phrase your words and how you do it and what you follow back in time, after you make your statement, these are things that they will learn. They're young and they will begin to learn soon. So we will
Yeah, but
expect
what I'm
that
saying,
and
he
I
had
don't
he
see a
had no
problem.
bad intention. He just
Yes.
calls out the situation
And
that's
I
happening
think
with
he was
TNT.
quite right in what he had to do. As I said,
Yeah.
he's now a foreign affairs minister, and he has to see about our population and all things being equal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, who
So
vex? I mean,
yeah,
we see that,
yeah,
Rubio
yeah.
is seen about America, right?
Well,
And
them
who
you
vex?
see,
Vex?
this is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So if some people, so, you don't, you have to be careful. If you're living in a glass house, you shouldn't be throwing stones. You know what I mean? But the thing about it is that we when we do something, right, it'll look like if we doing the worst thing, and the way that the
Yeah,
PNM,
especially
yeah,
UNC.
yeah, and when they have I don't know, they have a remember I told you where the nurses walked out of San Fernando Hospital,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to get into too much of it, but obviously you know what I was talking about. There was a natural, almost like a rehearsed sort of system, right? That these things would happen. It's not something that I think is almost like it's genetic. It's not something that they even plan. It's just that it's so smooth and wonderfully done. And this is why one of the things is that when our ministers sit in the ministry in the next few weeks, early in the clock, earlier clock, they have to begin to kind of sit back a little bit. And this is where this team here, I think other teams or other persons who might be interested in coming on board, hey, we are not looking to be a minister. We're not looking to be a senator. We're not looking for no big jobs or whatever. You know what I mean? All we're saying is,
Yeah,
hey,
and I
we are,
happy with my 10 days here in New
you
Jersey. I good
understand?
to go.
Yeah. So it's like, come on, we want to see good for our country. We have a good feeling about what is happening. Don't get vexed with us. We would love to make some suggestions. Some of these are evidence based. They're not something that we're pulling out of our hat because hey, we feel it could be done. Yeah, there's some engineering solutions. I mean, as I said, you just go to Jamaica, right? Take up a plane and fly to Amsterdam. Go to Venice. Look at how people can build these things in the water and live with the water, right? Port of Spain has to learn to live with the water. Port of Spain is built, right, almost on reclaimed land. You know what I mean? You're going to have to deal with the water as climate change is rearing its ugly head and the waters are rising. So in other words, then if you have poor drainage, you have bad hillside development in Diego Martin and all of these places, right? You have what when we took over government in UNC in the People's Partnership, in the first week of government, The Honorable Prime Minister had to put on our tall boots and go up to Diego Martin because there was so much floods in that area and the hill came down. And you know the reason why it came down is because of the number of septic tanks that they had on the hill. All right. What it did is it actually weakened the infrastructure of the hill. So right away, Botiwari started to look at hillside development, and he revamped the whole hillside development policy, and that is something that he did in his years when he was there. The problem now is enforcement of that by town and country, right, and the officers of the town and country, right, and the local government. So now enforcement of that now will allow less water coming down the hillside, less development on some of the hillsides because it's going to come down if you have a very, very heavy rainfall and lots of rainfall. And that was a big problem. When we brought in the engineers from abroad and they looked at it, they told us it was that. At ODPM, we did an analysis ourselves, and we found that it was due to all the septic tanks that were just eroding in. Think about it, into the hills. So the infrastructure of the hills it begins to get damaged.
But I had a suggestion, and I'm not an engineer, but I was saying as we control the flow of the water coming down on the hills. First of all, a lot of infrastructure was built without any proper coordination. But what I'm saying, if we can create horizontal and diagonal drains, so we can create a water break instead of all the water running down the way it comes down, and you
Yeah, the
how to
technology
say,
you listen, Gary, you have hit the nail on the head, right? We had to go to Japan, right? On the invitation of JICA, right? JICA, funded by the Japanese government as part of climate change fund, which was approved, right? And they used that to bring a lot of engineers, not just from Trinidad but from all over the Caribbean. And what you're saying is exactly. Remember, they had quite a lot of hills. They even took us to how they dug these channels in the hills, right? And the water went into them, the surface water, right? And it was collected lower down in retention systems, as I was
right,
telling you before. And then
right.
the porous material using the little squares, right? It's almost like surface tension, right? It's like it works on surface tension. So you make like these little tiles, right? And the surface tension now attracts the water on the tiles. And then you lay these tiles under your pavements and your walkways and your parks and your car parks in the city higher up. So when the water falls, it stays on top, porous concrete, so it goes into the cisterns. And amazingly, it cuts off a lot of that water coming down to the lower part of the city, right? So again, the
Exactly what
technology
I'm talking
is
about,
there.
controlling the flow of
Yes,
how that water comes down there into
yes,
the city, into the base. We
yes,
have the catchment area, the control the flow of that water, and
yeah,
some of that water could stay up the hill
yes.
if you were to store it
Yes,
for
and
the
they use
supply
it. They
of
have. They
water.
showed us. They showed us where they collect it in these systems, right? And they use these pumps, right? And these
Right.
pumps now actually now water the parks, right? You have ponds, for example. It fills the ponds because of evaporation. You lose a lot of water. You use a lot of water,
Yeah.
right? You have to top it
Yeah.
up.
But the
So you don't.
retention
You're not
I was
using.
talking about is you
Yeah,
create a kind of, you'll have smaller retention where you would have to create some kind of lakeside,
yeah,
especially on the hills, right?
yes,
If you
yes.
trap that water within the mountain up there, you could create that, and then you use it as you treat the water and it
Well,
provide us a water supply.
in Japan, what they do is they use these for recreational parks, water
Yes.
fishing. People come and they have little things they sell on the banks of the ponds.
Yeah,
Boy,
but Doug, also what
yeah,
I'm saying to you, the people up in the hills have to full water and tote it back up the hills. So why not trap the water up there and create a water supply also,
yeah. It's
for the
it's
people?
it's it's well, you know what you're saying there is common sense, right? And what I'm trying to tell you, it's what you're saying there exists, and we went to see it, right? So the problem now is how what we went to see, right, is translated into policy change or policy review or policy development. That is the
We
big
have
question,
to have the
right?
political will. We have to have a government
Right.
interested
So what
in
I'm
what is
suggesting
saying.
is,
Yeah.
I mean, having worked in ODPM for 6 years, having seen, using this as an example, the examples of technology in similar countries funded by funds that were given for climate change and all of these things, we went, right? We brought it back. We sent in the reports. The reports that we did, we had to send it in. The permanent secretary was behind us, so we submitted the report because to get a sign off, the permanent secretary, their responsibility was that once you go there, you have to justify the expenditure. You have to also submit your report. This was done by my office, right? We sent it down to the Ministry of National Security because ODPM falls under the Ministry of National Security. When it went down to the permanent secretary, I don't know where it went. I don't know where it went. Now, obviously, that policy would have to go to a number of agencies, such as the Water Resource Agency, which is under Public Utilities, right? It will have to go under Ministry of Works, right?
Well, how was it traveling by donkey cart?
Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? The thing about it
Yeah.
is that it has to involve other ministries. We had the discussion the first time we came in, when I came on, where we have to have this public administration, right, system, whereby you have to have some sort of inter-ministry coordination to allow for a lot of these projects not to be put on tables, like obviously what was done with ours, but to start a
But
translate.
you build a governmental intranet system,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And within seconds, a minute for the most, is uploaded into the various.
But everything is now. I mean, now long time. I mean, even before my time, even in my time, we were sending emails, right? But PDF files are transferred; they go into a cloud, right? So the thing about it is that once I submit something to the ministry, now I don't have to take a document and walk it now to go
Yeah,
down to
you
the
could
PS and whatever.
build it into the
It's
cloud
sent.
too. But what I'm saying,
What?
even before that, if you
Yeah.
have an intranet system within the country
Right.
too, you
So
could
what
do
you're
that.
talking about, we do have the internet system. What we don't have is a clearinghouse, right? So what we have to have is a proper clearinghouse for data, right? So that when the information via PDF files of it go to a particular clearinghouse, right? You have persons who you hire there in that system to take those now and send it to the relevant ministries. Each ministry now have to create, for example, we talked about an interministerial committee to deal with flooding. So once those documents come, you remember you have a number of documents. You would have documents coming from planning and development for people they send, for example, on the climate change conference, right? You would have people from energy and Ministry of Energy and Environment or whatever it is. They would also have people going to other types of climate. There are two modalities of climate change advocacy and climate change mitigation, right? So you'll find that ODPM will be dealing with mitigation of sort of, climate effects and sea level rise and whatever, whereas energy will be dealing with carbon emissions and all the other things. So now, so when you have programs now coming from everyone who is dealing with that, and it comes back to what translates into flooding for the man who's affected in the woodlands and the barrapores, and and he loses his crops and agriculture, and every year he doesn't have a bed to sleep, and he's worried every time he see the rain set up. This is where now it has to come down now to the burgesses, and who is responsible for the burgesses? The Ministry of Local Government. So in other words, then you have to have that pathway from the policy of the other ministries, planning and development, public administration, ODPM, blah 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 blah, and they need to come down now to local government and then translate that into real projects that mitigate structurally and non-structurally what is happening with the people on the ground. By the way, we just had an earthquake in Trinidad, 5.4. We felt it here in the south next to our neighbor here. So we also have to really now look at. I mean, people forget that we are an earthquake-prone country. It's one of the things in this chat. Well, the disaster chat that we have to talk about in the very near future. Did we lose you guys? Are you there?
I'm here, Doc. I'm listening. I said most of what you said today.
I don't know. Gary might have dropped a bit. I'm not hearing him. So.
Especially with the.
No, I was giving Mr. Singh a chance to respond.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But listen, look at what you just mentioned here. I mean, this is good information. So this channel has to remain, very effective and up and running to keep the the source of information and education flowing. I deeply appreciate having Dr. Rambup coming on board here, former ODPM CEO, fully knowledgeable about these type of disaster response and how to do it, the right way. So, all that is very much appreciated. Yes, you see, this is why I've been pushing very hard to get the local citizens and the volunteer operation mobilized and trained, and so we have things in place. We get with a hit with it, like when Brett hit Trinidad. I mean, Stuart Young was like he didn't know which direction he was headed in. Gary Gary Griffith had to pull him out. If
Yeah.
Gary Griffith didn't take some action, you know, he was walking around like a little boy behind Gary Griffith, like Gary Griffith is his daddy, I mean, so I saw this and I reached out to help here, and that's how I contacted these people here in Jersey City. I happened to attend Independence Day, and I run into the guys and I said, "Boy, this is like Christmas finding the guys because this was the disaster unit, the volunteer unit in Jersey City. They have a very large unit there that that's recognized, and they had all their tables and all the information and stuff like that. So I want to bring this guy on. He was traveling. I want to bring him back on so we can chat a little bit. Probably this week I might be able to get him. And I definitely want to push for the EMT training and the disaster response training, and so that our local government is organized. We don't know, anything can hit Trinidad anytime. We don't know, right? I mean, especially with that earthquake, you don't have much time to respond. In seconds, a whole
Yeah.
building collapse.
Yeah.
And the road block, and you can't get this and you can't get that, and
Yeah.
anything could happen in an earthquake. We have seen it happen in other countries. We have been God blessed to, for the years that we didn't have anything that major, but it could happen. We
Well,
not
we
out
we
of the
we are
loop of
we,
things.
we are overdue for it. One of the things that it is frustrating sometimes to come
What
and
if you
to
watch the
chat.
pattern, right? Is all
Yeah.
sides of the country all the time. Every time an earthquake happened, it went all the
Yeah.
way around, almost making a circle.
Yeah, it's overdue. It's overdue. The thing about it is that I remember sitting down in Geneva, and we were doing. I was appointed as the intergovernmental expert, right, on disaster risk reduction by the government, and I was sent to plan for the. Well, what we developed was, well, we went to Japan and we developed what was called the Sendai framework, which is the global policy for disaster risk reduction to be implemented by all UN member states in all countries. Right? It's a policy that guides regional policy, and regional policy was dictated by what we call the SIDIMA, right? Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy. So basically, when you're looking at strategic plans, right, you have your global strategic plan, which was the Sendai strategy for disaster, right? Just briefly, I will tell you. And then the regional one will be SIDIMA, the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy for the CARICOM states, right? And then when you come into Trinidad, now you would have your Trinidad and Tobago National Disaster Strategy, right? So this is how everything aligns, and each one aligns to each other to ensure that the key performance indicators are basically measured by each level. And Trinidad and Tobago has its national disaster plan, so to speak, and we would have our KPIs linking back to both the regional and to the global policy, so to speak. I was appointed as one of the persons who were part of the team that developed the metrics to measure, right, the implementation of disaster risk reduction in all United member states, right, United Nations member states. And if you go to that United Nations and you Google my name inside that, you'll see I'm one of the persons that actually helped develop that whole dashboard, right, to measure performance of the implementation of disaster risk reduction in member states, including our country. So when you come now and you look at what happened, as you said about Stuart, and when you left ODPM in 2015, when United National Congress People's Partnership lost elections, right? I was still working in the ODPM. My contract would have ended in March 31st, 2017. So I was there for almost a year after. But during that year, what the PNM did is they appointed. They didn't even advertise the position. They appointed a deputy CEO, right, in a guy called Colonel Dave Williams, if you remember, he had to resign because he said of the thing about the disaster, right? When Dave
Yeah, no
Williams,
biggie, Mr. No
right,
biggie.
right. When he went in there now, he actually was the CEO. I was just CEO in name only. I never did anything at all. I was just signing papers, and for 1 year they had me in a in a non-existent position. Right away, things started to fall, and we are where we are now. We just had a 5.2 or 5.6. I think I just heard my wife say that she looked at it and it was somebody reported seismic center UV seismic is saying is about a 5.2. So basically, what happens is that we have an earthquake, right? We know we have an earthquake, but what happened in the last regime is that they removed all the what we created was a national, right, response, a national emergency response system, right? A system that was working. And what we did is we itemized, we developed what is called a national response framework. In that framework, everyone has a responsibility, and standard operating procedures were developed for every single agency in Trinidad and Tobago. Right? We put it up on our website, okay? And every agency, local government has a responsibility, even down to the hardware in the community had a responsibility, even down to the church group had a responsibility in the national response framework. The problem
Yeah,
was now,
you have to lay out a plan of action. You have to do an
right,
assessment of
right.
the resources you have within the local
Right, and
community.
and what you have to do now, using the local government as the authority, which is the authority for the burgesses, right? They need to also work with all the other agencies, and they need to do the exercises, the drills, right? They need to do the tabletop exercises, and they need to create the measles, and they need to exercise these SOPs and look at the gaps and see if you could fill them. Yes. So for 10 years, all of these little regular exercises had to be done. It had to be able to find out what was happening, what were the key risks in one community as different to the other. If you have a community, for example, in Point Lisas, just next to the industrial estates, right? Their risks are mostly gaseous, right? They're downwind. So if something does go there now, you remember you will have to move these people to certain areas and schools and whatever, and you'll have to have thousands of gas masks to get these people out of the area. Whereas in Rio Claro and Mayaro, it's going to just be tsunamis and surges, right? You know what I mean? So these are some of the things that were done, right, in the time that I was at ODPM. But when you look back at it now, you didn't see it. The other thing was the call center that I talked about. You know, we started to streamline to have one call center. Now, if you have a problem in Trinidad, you have 14 numbers to call. Plus, you have to call TSTT, plus you have to call WASAS, plus you have to call TNTech. You have so much numbers to call when in developed countries all over the world, even some underdeveloped or lesser developed, when you just call 911. You know what I mean? So we really need to do a gap analysis. Just had an earthquake. It shook me. And I said to myself, my God, I wonder what is happening. You know what I mean?
Well, hey, Doc, I posed the question in the disaster group, right? We see Southern Command comes out every year to do training with us. Now, this year they specified on disaster response and all this kind of thing. How does that transcend to the local community? What does the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force do with that? Do they put the training and the information in their back pocket and go sit down in a corner with it, or they pose and show they was with the U.S. government military for photo op?
Well, I
Because
was
I don't see nothing happening.
I
I don't
mean,
see nothing happening.
when I went into ODPM in 2011, right? In fact, while I was when I was now getting orientated into the ODPM, this exercise was going on, trade winds, right? It is done very often in the Caribbean, right? And it involves all the other countries with SEDEMA coordinating, and they even tested ODPM. The ODPM was doing the testing at the National Emergency Center for the disaster component of trade winds. So it's something that is done every year to test our systems to see if we have things reasonably in place to deal with any catastrophic emergency, including some of the hazards that we are currently facing, including hurricane storms and of course earthquakes and tsunamis. So it is done. The question you asked was very
Do
interesting.
we have any
Yes.
amphibious vehicle, or we have
Yes,
one?
we do, because when I was in ODPM, what we did is, luckily we had a reasonable budget at the time. So what we did is we worked closely. What happens with the ODPM? The ODPM is not a legal entity. It was formed by Mrs. Hazel Manning during the time of the late Patrick Manning in 2005 via a cabinet minute that was presented to cabinet, a cabinet note, sorry, and it was approved as a division, and it came out from NEMA. So what we did is we bought the amphibious vehicles, right, and we would give it to the 1st Engineer Battalion, located at Kumutu, under the standing orders of the ODPM, right? There's a direct communication between the CEO of ODPM and the 1st Engineer Battalion, the major in charge there. And they would be able to support the ODPM because the ODPM is just a scientific team. But when it comes to tactical operations in terms of in a coordinated way, not ready to go and use a shovel and clear the drain, that's where local government comes in with the URPs and the CPEPs and whatever. But the 1st Engineer Battalion is to position itself to look at SATCOM communication, right, to get the bigger vehicles, to save lives. Then in the rescue part of it.
So who's the person that takes command there now?
Right. So the officer in charge of the 1st Engineer Battalion, by a standing order that existed when I was there with the ODPM, he would take the call from the CEO and then he would begin to implement. Of course, it will have to be endorsed by the Chief of Defense, because as you know, the Chief of Defense, right, would be under the line Ministry of National Security, under the overview of the President of the state. But now, of course, it's a new ministry, the Ministry of Defense, which will be Wayne Sturge, right, the minister there. So now it's a little different, but it's the same thing. They would have to get that sort of chain upward. But in the second of an earthquake, you don't have to wait for that standing order to be implemented by that command. That will be automatic. So the 1st Engineer Battalion would be deployed.
So you're saying now that basically ODPM has been shifted with our new structure on the Ministry of Defense.
No, the ODPM is actually under the Homeland Security, under
Security. But operational wise now, I mean, Ministry of Defense.
Right. So this is where the problem is. You see, Homeland Security is an American thing, and in the United States, right? And when I visited,
I know why it was created.
Right.
It was created to bring all the various agencies together, because what happened with 9/11 is that there was the lack of communication with all. So it's just like it's central command.
Right. In my opinion, because of having worked in ODPM, the ODPM is better suited for civil defense, right? It's a defense organization for public safety rather than in a crime sort of context, you see. So I would have preferred, I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, is this done fine? But I'm just saying that it would have been better for us, because when we have a national disaster, right, it's actually the military, the emergency support services of the military, and that 2 o'clock in the morning thing, when you wouldn't have local government, they'll be sleeping. The local government is a civilian organization. All the disaster management units are 3 or 4 people with a little pickup, right, hired by the local government to take a call during the day to see if they can sort out the little small issues around. But when there's a national overt, right,
disaster,
a thing like an earthquake, they will be civilians under the rubble. So therefore, the ODPM, which is your coordinating authority for government centrally, they are the ones who will be sitting on the intelligence center, and they, under the national response framework, their responsibility is to change from a group of scientists, right, to begin to coordinate what is called a National Emergency Operations Center, which links up with all the member states of CARICOM and coordinated by CDEMA. Right. So therefore, what happens
now? The operations for the local municipality now. How will goes?
Right. So what happens? What happens is that once the NEOC, the National Emergency Operations Center, right, is actually now set up. It has to set up virtually initially and then physically with all the key players. Right. Local government will stand up what is called their Emergency Operations Center, right, which is now going to coordinate all 14 municipalities, and TEMA will set up theirs. So how it works is that the National Emergency Operations Center, right, the incident commander at the NEOC of the local government will communicate directly with that NEOC and have a representative there as well, right? So that is where the link up is. And in ODPM, you have 26 persons physically who will have to be flown there by the 1st Engineer Battalion and any one of the support agencies of the military, the Air Guard, right, to that command center. And that 26 functions is health, energy, right, airports authority. I mean, there are 26 of them.
Yeah, but
Ambulance,
with Rowley
right?
grounding the helicopters, and what kind
Right.
of support we have at this
Right.
point?
So you understand. So what I'm saying therefore is, listen, all right, you know what I'm talking about, right? National response framework, right? What is the prime directive now? Let us say, okay, you have a new government, right? And they have separated national security into two ministries, right? So you have Ministry of Defense and you have Ministry of National Security. So when you have to revise that national response framework, right? What is the first thing? Let's say there's a massive earthquake that hits Trinidad and Tobago. All communications are lost. Everything is gone. What is the prime directive of the National Response Framework, National Security Ministry, which is now divided into two? The answer to that is the first thing that has to be happening with Wayne Sturge has to make sure, right, is that if he's alive and well, and if he's not alive and well, the system has to be in place for the military to move the president of the state to a safe place, right? Okay. The next one is Wayne Alexander, if he's alive or well, and if he's not alive or well, right? Special branch, and they have to make sure that the head of government and the attorney general are in a safe place, because that is the only way that our sovereignty is maintained, our government is maintained, our country has a government. All right, and that fell down in Grenada, it fell down in Haiti. You understand? When they had the
Right.
disasters. So these
We
are
feel
things that
the faith is secure.
I sit
Yeah.
in my home, right? I can't ask a question. And when you go into ministry, there is something that the ministers have to ensure, and especially in national security, that is important. That comes under what we call business continuity planning,
Right.
right? So my first order, if I was a minister, I was sitting there. That's the first thing I would say, guys. We have two ministries. I hope that this prime directive, right, is in place. That the standard operating procedures will now have to be split in two, because in one ministry it was, you know, so I'm saying it's now two ministries. So to protect our country, that has to be in place. Now, I'm sure the discussion might have happened already because the ministers were there for a whole week, and I'm sure that the standard operating procedures would have been revised, and it would have gone to the National Security Council Secretariat, and of course it will be presented to the National Security Council's chair, who happens to be the Prime Minister, at the very first meeting that they're going to be having very soon. You see, so I know, because I was part of the development of the National Operations Center with Rear Admiral Kelshaw. At the time, he was appointed to develop the National Operations Center, and I was one of the key members that developed the concept of the National Operations Center. So I know about this because all of this is part of that. You know, so
Yeah.
you understand what I'm saying,
Go
Eric?
ahead. I'll be listening to you. Go ahead. We here. Listen to you. Go ahead. Lay it
It's
out.
it's interesting. Do you know that I served on the Airports Authority board for 6 years as well, right? And I was the chairman of the Operations Safety and Security Subcommittee, right? And the members of my committee,
That's another catastrophe we have to deal with over there.
yes, you know, when we did the national infrastructure risk analysis for business continuity planning, do you know which organization in 2014, right, had failed the business continuity planning as an infrastructure that had the weakest infrastructure for business continuity? National Petroleum. So, you know, these are information that are there already. It was submitted by us. Remember, Mr. Singh, we talked about silos of data, right? We had done a 6 month project funded by the United Nations, the U.S. State Department, United Nations, I think it was UNDP, right? We had funding that was given by United Nations for the project with the U.S. State Department. We had consultancies come down. We did it at the KPOC, right? We presented the data, and we found that one of the biggest problems in Trinidad and Tobago was silo data that actually exists in Trinidad and Tobago that are very good, but it's not being shared and it's kept in silos. We took that report and we recommended it to the Ministry of Planning and Development at the time, right? And well, look at where we are now. You know, so It's not
Well,
that it wasn't done.
we have a lot of people with university degrees and they can't get nothing done. So
Yeah,
when the time comes to be tested, is going to be too late. So I mean, I want to encourage the conversation to to kind of push the idea of getting things in place. Things have to be strategically placed in the country because you never know which direction you have to pull supplies from,
yeah,
and it has to be locally,
yeah,
within a local reach, whether it's in a
yeah,
45-foot container.
yeah,
It has to be guarded. It cannot be allowed to be looted. It has to be heavily guarded.
yeah,
But the supplies has to be, it cannot be too far off. It has to be,
yeah.
decentralized. I mean, I also am calling for, a lot of things that I will discuss with you privately. I don't want to say too much here right now about that, but
Yeah. Well, remember we talked about that, yeah? And the thing about that's part of what I'm talking about. When the earthquake just shook us here, I mean, next door to me is the Prime Minister's residence, and she is going to be working from home now for a large part of hopefully that. I mean, in terms of until things get rectified. So, which means that in a sense, I would expect that infrastructure becomes critical infrastructure, and some of these systems and some of the processes that I just mentioned, right,
yeah,
where head of government, right now, do they have a generator? If current goes, then what happens? Is it that it's going to be a blackout? You understand what I mean? Are preparations made to
satellite
have a generator?
phones,
You understand? You understand?
satellite
Yeah, you
boosting
understand what I'm
equipment.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you understand what I'm talking about. And you see, that falls under the responsibility of the honorable ministers of national security in the two ministries. Right. So I mean I'm saying it, I'm sure. I mean I looking at listen, we have very competent people in those ministries. Special branch, they know what they're about. The soldiers, the chief, the defense force, they know what they're about. So I'm not saying that they don't, and I'm not saying that they have those protocols and programs in place. You understand what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that those things will now have to change a bit because the SOPs would have been different because the ministries have been changed in the last week. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. And now that the honorable prime minister said that she's going to be in South a bit more, I mean, just a simple thing of that saying that is that again SOPs would have to change. You know, yeah. So
So,
it's just an observation.
yeah,
I mean,
especially
I'm
want
making a
to.
statement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Spell it out, man. Spell it out. This is what
I mean,
should
it
be
just
done.
came to me because I mean I'm not in it now, as you know. But I mean, we just got shook by an earthquake, and if it were big, 7.5, and right now I would not have been able to talk to you now. Data would have been down, whatever it is, all over would have been, a blackout in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I mean,
You
we
know,
haven't blocked out without any incident. So, I mean,
yeah.
could imagine
So
an incident.
yeah, so let's I mean get a little shake up, and hopefully when we looking at our disaster chat, very soon, and hopefully we could do
Uh,
some training and whatever, so.
Maybe try and have a conversation with the Minister of Public Utilities to
Yeah,
give him some idea about putting certain things in place as communication goes.
yeah.
He's in the chat, and maybe you can have a one-on-one with him when you get a chance.
Well, I know, as I
Uh,
said, I know these guys have. I mean, I mean, they would have been obviously planning
no,
long
the way I
before.
look at it, it's not that they
They would
don't
know.
know or
Yeah,
anything. I'm not saying that they don't
yeah,
know. The thing about it, you have so much to
yeah,
deal with. It's good to
yeah.
remind, you
I
know.
guess, but I
Yeah,
get
and based
scared,
on your
to do.
experience, I would like to have
Listen,
your input.
Gary. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know how much people listen on the chat, but I just be real, real scared to engage, with some of these ministers because sometimes they do get a bit
Well,
vexed, when you start
well,
telling them things that so.
I am not, and who vex because Trinidad and Tobago is my country, and when things
Please,
happen
Dr. Rama,
and
but
it's
you
not
feel
organized, first of all,
you
I
feel you know
cannot.
too much,
Yeah,
yeah.
they will say, look at he talking from America. Come and do it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
You
what I'm
you
saying
up
to you
there
is,
in America.
you
Stay where
you
know what's going
already
on
you are
here.
affected with this. Is we here and this that. I've been through all of that. But
Oh,
what the way I
God.
look at it,
Hmm.
I my concern. I'm a risk management type of guy,
Yes.
right? My first priority is to prevent. My
Yes.
highest priority. I always try to prevent, and
Yeah.
I cannot afford for my prime minister to get embarrassed. I
Correct.
cannot afford for my government to get
Yeah.
embarrassed and to be unprepared.
And
So
one of the and you know what I'm saying is that one of the biggest, when you have let's say you're judging performance, right, and risks, right, by using a pie chart, right, as you now enter business continuity planning of the actual government, right, if something were, and I'm praying, we, as I said, I started by saying we have a nice peace in the country, you could actually feel that sense of hope, that sense of
there's a relief. I'm
anticipation.
listening.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
physically, but I feeling it all the way over here.
I'm telling you, I'm here and I'm telling you what's happening. So it's almost like we have an expectation of our young leaders and our new leaders and our honorable prime minister who's given the chance to come second time. I mean,
An
they were,
evil force has
so
been lifted. An
yeah,
evil force has been lifted.
it's a kind of feeling, like a wind that's actually blown across the country, and I mean you're feeling it in the conversations. Even PNM diehards are
But that is
talking.
how God operates. When God moves and He chases all evil, they may
Yeah.
know PNM may understand up to now what hit them.
Yeah. So I would say that looking at me now, what triggered me a little bit with this conversation is that there are risks that need to be addressed and needs to be reassured very quickly. And if something were to happen, God willing, it doesn't. But the first thing is that you have to protect your head of state and you have to secure your head of government, right? And your attorney general, your government. So, in other words, and I hope that the business continuity plans of the National Security Ministry, with special reference to that part of it, so that now that you have a situation where the honorable prime minister, head of government, is now working in a number of places, right, that appropriate standard operating procedures be reviewed, right, and tested and drilled, right, so that what will happen is you have a seamless, right, protection in the event of such a event occurring, so that this government won't look stupid, because in the final analysis they are the government in terms of the leaders, and the systems are supposed to be operating seamlessly and transcend government. In other words, and even if another government was here and another government took over, these protocols are embedded and are tested and are inherent in that. You don't have to rely on those technical officers and those government officials and those officers to do that. It's automatic. But the point I'm saying is that the ministers of government and the prime minister and the National Security Council, which is the Council of Ministers, they need to make sure, right, that is in place. If you know what I mean. Yeah, you understand? Tick the boxes and say, okay, guys, let's ask the questions. Is this in place, guys? Could you just make sure and let me know if it is, and that's it. So the CYA kind of thing, yeah.
So CIA is part of security, right? That's our
CYA, color,
national
yeah.
code.
Yellow is the code. CYA. Cover your ass, because if you don't, right, you have to make sure that it's not you are going to take the blame. Something happens now in the country and you have no government because you can't find your head of government. You don't know which building she is in, and there's no generator at the head of government's establishment now to power up now for any form of communication. You know what I'm saying? These things will have to be put in place. If it's not.
Mr. Singh got quiet and we there. But like I said, I deeply appreciate it, and you laying out these things based on your experience and your qualification.
Yes, I'm
If
worried.
I
See,
say it, they might say,
these things might be
who
stupid,
is he?
but they're
Where he
very
know? We know
important. Yeah,
he.
very important.
I'm
Yeah,
listening,
very
brother.
important.
I'm listening quietly and taking it in, but I think I don't think they are thinking about this slide as yet. I think they're trying to see where is the money going to come from.
Yes,
I
yes,
think that is preoccupying all of their minds,
yeah. Well,
given
you
that.
balance, as you know, Mr. Singh, you need to balance your dashboard.
Yeah,
You need to,
correct,
you have to look at one thing, but you also have to look at everything else that could affect that
correct,
dashboard.
correct.
It's like a doctor seeing a patient in the emergency room or in the casualty. The guy has a chop wound on the left, and man, it looks really pretty bad. Or you go to an accident site and you see a child screaming like crazy, and you go
Hmm.
to the child when the fact is that the mother is quiet and the mother is fighting for her life, and the child is screaming. The child has an airway, You know what I mean? So you're trying to save the child. The child is alive and screaming. He has an area, and the mother is dying because the mother is quiet because something is in her throat
Yeah.
and she's bleeding. So priorities are very important. Yes, of course, we have the child crying, which is the economics and the state of the country. But there's something. We just had an earthquake, and the thing about it is that we have been seeing ODPM in the last 10 years in terms of that sort of coordination, right? And there's
And
fragmented
knowing the
coordination.
fact that the deterioration that took place under Dr. Rowley,
You understand? So the thing about it is that
it
clearly
was, yeah.
infrastructure has not been maintained. Infrastructure, some of the systems, the whole policy change has been non-scientific. You decentralized contingency planning into 14 municipalities and Tobago, each now been given the jurisdiction and the authority to see about their own regional municipality. But what happens, like a brain and a body, if your liver, right, has failed, or your kidney has failed, the brain has to know. The brain has to be able now to put contingency planning to use the other kidney or other systems to sort of back up what the other organ is doing. So your organs are fine. Yeah, all the municipalities may be operating fine, but when they're overwhelmed, you have to have that 24-hour situational awareness at all time, like what the brain does in the body, to pick it up, right, using indicators. And once you do that, you tactically deploy something at 2 o'clock in the morning when all the other municipality civilians are asleep, and that is where you have to have a central national operation center and the ODPM, which brings in 26 emergency service functions representing 26 ministries and agencies and departments, from ambulance systems to airports authority to Red Cross to Ministry of Energy and Tourism. Everybody's sitting. They will have to be sitting there or represented by that at that operation center 24/7. So if a malaria case comes in on a boat, right, in the middle of the night in Point Lisas, and the port health officer picks up that has to be flagged. If 2 divers or 3 divers are caught in a tank in the middle of the night or doing a dive and nobody else knows about it, and that report is sent to the authorities, that has to be sent to the National Operations Center, and right away that is flagged, and key resources can be tactically sent there within a short space of time. So that broke down. That is what they found in the investigation, and that is why that's a crime. You see, so that is why people have
Were,
to.
were you referring to the Paria situation?
Yes,
Com,
that's the
com,
reason. That whole
com,
command and control was gone because the National Operations Center did not pick up that incident report.
well, first of all, was it existing under while this incident took place?
Well,
If
I
you think
think
about
I
it,
think that I
who
think
was
that
in
they did
charge?
say the National Security Ministry is supposed to be in charge of the National Operations
Yeah,
Center.
but
They
Dr.
say,
Rambo,
yeah.
Fitzgerald Hines was walking somewhere on Saturday in Lavantil there under low key. He ain't say nothing. He was the Minister of National Security. He never came forward. Stuart Young was on the scene, they say, within an hour or so. Stuart Young didn't do anything to call for help. He did not. He was he was former minister. This is where I look at it, right? He was former Minister of National Security. He was Minister of Energy. He was Minister in the Prime Minister office. He was Dr. Rowley right hand man, which has full authority, in my view, to activate anything and make any judgment calls.
Yeah.
What did Chotyong do? This is what is missing
See,
out of the
so
Commission of
Gary,
Inquiry.
if you have, and I'm sure you understand how standard operating procedures work,
Oh yeah.
how the
Yeah.
whole system of command and control works, and
Company.
how if something is operating effectively and you put it in place, and that's why I give you the analogy of the brain. There's nothing more fantastic to use than the command and control system of the human being, right? The brain is your national operations center, right? If you did not have the brain, you cannot have 24-hour situational awareness. So
And
if something,
who's the incident commander for National
right,
Operations Center?
this is what I'm saying. So the incident commander there, right, would be the person who is going to be on that shift basis, who have been assigned the task of heading the National Operations Center. Right now, we always ask the question in the last 10 years, and they always said yes, the NOC exists. right? But we didn't know. Remember when we had the People's Partnership government, right? We had appointed Hira, right, Commander Hira, as the head of the NOC. Good. In the last 10 years, I can't remember who was the head of NOC. I'm not sure if SSA was running it or the police commissioner was running it or whatever. We never got clarity on that. So in other words, then
Yeah,
it's as though
no, but I understand that, Dr. Rambo. But what I'm saying to you, the minister with the full authority,
well, you see,
right?
this is what it is. The
Who
responsibility
did he
will
call?
always fall on the line minister, right? The responsibility will. But there was supposed to have a technical officer, right, a commander, right, whether
Yes.
it was the military, who would have been the officer in charge of that situational awareness
And it
center,
was
whatever they call
carnival
it.
time, so all the
Yeah,
senior officers
yeah,
was partying and drunk or probably somewhere doing
yeah.
something,
But
you know.
you understand the
Yeah.
point I'm making, right? So what it
Yeah, yeah,
is that
yeah.
the
I
reason
know.
why you had all that, and of course it was found out in the forensic audit of what went on at Paria, and that is why the court, right, did what they had to do. The point about it is that they definitely failed in the command and control of, and that is an example that if an earthquake hits the country right now, right, crap will smoke we pipe, because the fact is that what I'm trying to say, you know, the reason why I came on today now was because of the earthquake, you know, right? I told you it was there. So when that triggered me, now I started telling you about the protocol that has to be in place to secure the head of state, right, and
Right,
of course the president of the Senate, the head
right,
of government, and the attorney general. I started with what is first needed. That before you could think of anything at all at the level of national security and the responsibility of any one of those. Now, who it is that informs the officer or the officers to go and do that? Who does that, right? It has to be the brain, right? And if you don't have a non-function, if you have a non-functioning brain that picks up this earthquake, right, that is confirmed by seismic, you know things are happening right now because you have the incident reports, because you have that brain there alert and watching everything in the country 24/7. It picks up the earthquake, and as soon as it picks up the earthquake, somebody takes up the red phone and calls the relevant military officers as well as the tactical officers, special branch, to find head of government and AG, to find president of state and president of the Senate, and get them to a safe house. You understand? So I am kind of giving you, in this chat, and so I'm telling you what needs to be done, right? So if now I'm saying this now after 5.2, the point is that I expect that somebody might listen and hopefully, right, take it forward and say, hey, is it in place? We need to get back that NOC functioning as soon as possible, right? To how the concept was developed. I was a member of the concept team that worked on the development of the NOC legal the legislation. So that is something that we need to put back in place, and we need to get back that 911 center. I think the government of Trinidad and Tobago now has to balance. How this conversation came on is, Mr. Singh, we talked about balancing the dashboard. So
Yep.
we are definitely doing things. We are seeing the data coming out on finance, but whilst they're doing that, our ministers, our line ministers, would also be meeting with their teams, and I am positive that these are some of the questions that they will be asking when they are dealing with the analysis of the status of the relevant ministries in all the different divisions. You know,
Yeah.
so there has to be some restructuring, and I'm sure there will be there you know this the restructure will have to be done, and then things will have to be put in place. They might have to reinvent the wheel in some
but
aspects because we don't know the damages.
well,
We don't know the
clearly,
damages that
I almost feel that we should have things like lie detector testing for senior officials of like SSA and senior
Big
heads
time.
of divisions of national security. I think that national security heads of divisions should all be
Well,
put through
we've
lie
seen we've
detectors.
seen
Psychometric
we've seen
testing.
about we've seen the SSA
Yeah,
guy was relieved of his position, which is a
yeah,
brilliant move.
yeah,
And we will talk more about these things off the
yeah,
air. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I just what I'm looking for as far as the disaster response is that from the NOC to the local government council on
Yeah,
the ground
yeah.
there,
That
there's a
is the
connection.
yeah. That is the CARICOM, right? CDMA, right? When I was a director of CDMA, as being the CEO of ODPM or being the CEO of any of the CARICOM states, right, or the head of your disaster agency, you become not automatically a director of the CDMA during that term. And in that, we developed the legislation. We strengthened the National Emergency Operations Center framework, where you have in each country you would have a central command or a national operations center, which only Trinidad at the time and all most of the member states we had that extra layer, which was the 24-hour situational awareness center. Most of the other NEOCs, we call them the National Emergency Operations Centers, which are centers which are actually stood up by the disaster authorities for hazards and mostly natural and man-made hazards, right?
Right.
They will be set up. They are going to be set up. But you see, that's where the problem lay. And when you look at CARICOM now, I always went back in CARICOM meetings, CDMA meetings, and I would say, okay, guys, I understand what you all are saying, but you have to stand up an NEOC. You have to have a brain. I'm a doctor. Your brain doesn't need standing up. That is how, even while you're sleeping, your brain is operating. So you need
Yes.
to have that 24-hour situation awareness center. So when we came up with the concept and the government agreed to form the NOC and Major Rear Admiral Kelshal was put in charge of that, I was one of the members on that committee. So what we had to do now, we went abroad and we looked at some of the National Operations Center. Gary Griffith and I went down to Brazil, right? And we had the opportunity to look at the NOC and how it functioned there for the World Cup before it started. You understand? So the National Operations Center concept, I think they went also to England and they looked at the Department of Public Safety and the COBRA, right? And they looked at it there. I went to Ministry of Homeland Security, right, and FEMA, right? I went to FEMA headquarters and I looked at their NUC and how it fit back to their NOC, right? You understand? So in a sense, we knew the concept, we developed the concept of the NOC, and the NOC had to be backed up by a call center. In other words, then you have to have information 24/7. So you have intelligence, that is police intelligence, military intelligence of all the divisions of the ministry. All right, you have intelligence in the energy sector because in Trinidad and Tobago, remember that the Ministry of Energy, right, has to be a key part of our economy. Of course, at that time we had the refinery and all of these things, so obviously it played a big part. But even now, energy
Yeah, but I mean,
remains,
if there's an earthquake, you have the Minister of Energy has to be engaged because the refinery can get
it's a
disrupted,
big
an
component of our,
explosion, and all this
yes,
kind of thing.
of our economic pie. So in other
Yeah.
words, then it is one of the major infrastructure. We call it critical infrastructure,
When that
right?
stuff
Yeah,
starts to burn, like we have a area here in New Jersey where
yeah,
all the fuel just come for the airplanes and stuff like that.
right,
Not too far from Newark Airport in Elizabeth area, Linden
yeah,
area there, right?
yeah.
And that area is heavily monitored and guarded.
Of course,
And a part of our security training
yeah,
was the discussion about that,
yeah.
you know.
Every time a ship, right, removes natural gas, liquid gas from the ports and move across in our waters, right? That's a high risk. I don't know if you remember an explosion that was in the United States that wiped out and almost destroyed the waterfront of a city because of an explosion on a liquid gas ship. So the thing about it is that, remember, when these things are happening in Trinidad and Tobago, they must have a 24-hour situational watch, right? And I mean, I'm sure it's going on, but the point about it is that certain persons need to kind of know about it. It needs to be definitely, under the purview, and that is why the divers, right, I'm always bringing it up because this is an example where that system failed, right? Your incident reporting, right? Your incident reporting of what is happening in the country 24/7 must feed back to that National Operations Center because that is the brain. And you must
And then we
develop,
saw a
yeah,
second incident now where Pete Phillips and the whole infrastructure collapsed. And after the Paria diver situation, nothing was improved to respond. Nothing was put in place. Okay, hello, we got caught with our pants down. We need to put some things in place. 2 years
yes.
almost after the previous incident, not one thing put in place to respond to such emergency.
See,
Pete Phillips' body never found
well,
up to
the thing
now.
about it is that we don't know. The first thing is they will come and say, well, it was done. I mean, and it existed. It's just that they didn't share that with the nation. But I mean, as I said, in my mind, in my consciousness, I mean, as I said, I knew what it was, what it's supposed to be, because I was part of the concept team that developed the NOC. All right.
Right.
We operationalized the NOC. My team member at the time, an ex-soldier, he used to be physically present, and another member of my team in that NOC 24/7. It used to be in Port of Spain, right? So the thing about it is that we had a presence there, and we were looking. At that time, they had, I don't know if you remember, we had cameras on the highways, right? We had a lot of problems trying to get the cameras at the airport, right, into the NOC, because it is almost like if data and certain portions of the police service were not sharing information, right? It were kept in silos, so you could all of that still needed work, right? Nowadays with technology and AI, it should be easier. The problem now will come with legislation. It
But
will
but,
come
but
with
the
training. You know.
infrastructure to support that, how much of it is really functional?
Well, this is what the needs analysis would have to be done. When the ministers are finished with their status analysis and assessment of what is happening now, then they will have to do a gap analysis, and then with that now they will have to understand. Is why I don't know if the persons who are there can be trusted to tell them what is exactly what they need to know, and this
No,
is
no,
why
no.
I'm a bit worried.
We would have to revamp that as quick as possible.
We need to know. You see, the thing about it is that if they don't know, right? I mean, this is 10 years down the line, right? If they don't know, right, the correct concept and the actual legislation, right, that actually governs the NOC, right? What is the components of the NOC that was supposed to be put in place, right? Yes.
Right.
If they don't know that and they don't have the time to read that document, they will have to depend on somebody to brief them. As I understand now, they are going to be so busy that they're not going to sit down for more than 50 minutes and hear anybody. Anybody who has ever engaged a minister of government, right? Once they become ministers, you're not going to get their air for a
No,
full hour. You're not going to get their air for even 5 to 10 minutes,
10 minutes
right?
for the max. 10 minutes for the
But
max.
one of the
Yeah.
things that I am looking at, just like how we said to pick up the phone and call this one and call that one, in this stage of the game, that message should be electronically transmitted before the call. You understand?
Yeah.
So with the notification of the incident where it's critical should go to certain people electronically, within seconds to know that there's an issue.
Yeah,
You
you see,
know,
and that is how the NOC works. It's a tactical unit, right? So what it is basically is like your brain, is like your body, right? When you
yeah.
when you touch a fire, right? The brain doesn't have to tell you move your hand. There's a reflex that occurs, which is there
Right.
that that moves your
This
hand,
is
right?
what I want to see, and
Right.
that
So the so
information
the
is
right. So
transmitted
these
instantly.
and right. The reflex is guided by chemicals, which really, if you translate that into operations, it's called a standard operating procedure. The
Yeah.
finger has a standard operating procedure built into the memory of the cells. So
Right.
once heat is detected by the nerve endings, the finger will move. Right.
Right.
It is when you have diabetes and you have a damage to the nerves or whatever, and your finger, right, cannot move itself, the brain will move the whole hand, because the brain has the ability to look over what the finger can't do. That's what I'm
Right.
trying to tell you. So therefore, that is the function of the 24/20 situation awareness. At the tactical level, right, a call would have come in for the divers. It would have gone straight to the person in charge of the ports, for example, energy, right? It would have come through the energy command, right? The incident, the health and safety officer, or whoever it is from energy, right, would have already, remember, through ODPM, they have a place at the NOC. Energy is represented in the NOC via the ODPM. They have a whole system that has been set up and drilled and tested for years, since 2005, even before. So that exists, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. That exists. So once that information comes to the person who is representing the ODPM, representing energy, that incident report would be taken up to another level, the executive or strategy level of the NOC. So if that now is a severe problem, it would have been already communicated to the Minister of National Security, and via that to the Office of the Prime Minister, because the National Security Council, right, is the Prime Minister, and the Council of National Security, sorry, the Council of Ministers. So right away it goes up there. If the Prime Minister gets that then and asks the military, do you have resources? Right? Ask Petrosian, do you have resources? Ask ODPM, what do you think needs to be done? right? Then right away on using bilateral and multilateral thing, you pick a call and you call the U.S. ambassador and say, "Hey, guy, I need to get some help. What do you think?" All right, and within 4 hours, you can have bilateral assistance coming down. So once you have that system and chain up, right, and you have that information flag, you can have tactical response at the executive and at the leadership level, at the enterprise level. You understand?
Right. So, but we didn't see none of that done because
No.
3 days the divers in the pipeline are still alive. It takes an hour and a half for an aircraft to get out, and a military jet can probably move a little faster.
Yeah.
You get what we see recently now a C5 or whatever it is, but they had a
Yeah.
smaller, faster jet. But we had people in place that they restricted, and we have to sort out that why they
Yeah, you
were
see, the
restricted.
decision making was made at a level where there were no competence, right, or no
Right.
ability for that decision making to be made, because the decision making was based on an incident report that was not taken up or monitored or flagged at a higher level of decision making, which was the
And
emergency
a
level.
situation like this, we
Yes.
should have a Coast Guard helicopter like what we see in the U.S. here that
Yes.
can bring the resources, the help, and then we don't even have a mini sub, not even a four-man mini sub that
And
can
the
go down there.
resources, yeah, the resources are available using our bilateral connections. If people's
Yeah, but
lives
I
are at
mean,
stake,
but I'm looking at Dr. Rambo also. These are the things that need to be put in place.
yeah,
Because of with the number of years we've been doing this type of business, we should have already have them in the sub. I mean, the
yeah,
full grounded the helicopters. We need them larger size helicopters for the Coast Guard because you can't wait for a boat to come. You need a helicopter to respond to bring additional resources there. Whereas the Coast Guard is not prepared to dive in deep water and stuff like that. They're not trained like Navy SEAL. All this training that we do with the U.S. Navy, we are not utilizing the Navy, U.S. Navy, to train our Coast Guard to their standards of capability and response. So
yeah.
I don't know what kind of
So
training we're really doing.
you see, the thing about it is that I mean, and this is where I'm a bit worried in the sense that when the incident occurred, it's just one of a number of things that can happen. I mean, it just goes to show that the system is not working, and
Government failed to take
yeah,
charge,
yeah.
basically.
I mean,
And the
I
little
mean,
boy, Dr. Rowley,
yeah.
put there, didn't know what to do. He seemed like he
Well,
panicked.
the mere fact that over I've been writing letters and making my comments, because there's no way to get letters out to go anywhere, because I don't even have the address. You send it to, but I send letters to the office of the prime minister. I send letters to national security. I send emails and WhatsApp and whatever. You're not gonna get redress, right? And we kept asking over the last 10 years, right, for some simple things. I was very worried that when they started to decentralize the call system, right, it was a problem, because if you look at the chaos that exists to try to call a number in disaster, right, it's a chaotic thing. So you have to have one number. All is science. I mean, there is science. I mean, oh my gosh, you go to
There's
a
science and there's
college.
common sense. A lot of common
Listen,
sense I
listen.
see before we can get to the science.
What makes it so hard is that you go to a college, right? You enter into Form 1, right? The science is taken for granted. You just have to learn the damn thing, right? If you learn an equation in mathematics in Form 1, V equal IR. You don't know what the hell that is, eh? But then all of a sudden now in Form 3, right, you realize that V is voltage, I is current, and R is resistance, because you actually start to do it. But the science was already there. You had to learn it by heart, right? So the science of communication, backed up by evidence-based analysis and studies in past in the countries of the world, backed up in reputable journals, show that to ease and to make efficiency, effectiveness of persons in disasters, of any sort of hazards, crime, any type of hazard affecting a person, to increase his access to get to help, right? He needs to only have to get one number to call. A child in a house where the parents are almost dying and in a problem could pick up a phone or a WhatsApp or their little iPad and dial 911 in an emergency. Yes? So he doesn't have
Right.
to go and dial 64852 to get the B people to come, and 3454211 to get local government to come, and 6455511 to get, I mean, and why it is that we have gone to that state in the first place. Why? Because the
Correct.
UNC government started to go 911, and you didn't like that because it was costing too much money. You didn't understand what all of this was,
No, no,
and
no. He
because
wa-
the UNC
they
government,
want the money for themselves, so they
because
needed
people's
to.
partnership was
Yeah,
doing it, you say, okay, you know what, that's not good. Let me just get rid of that and let me just go this way. This is the way. This is the way it is. But it was not the right way. It
yeah.
was never the right way. You can't have 14 numbers
But
and
yeah, but
Tobago number two on
the
one.
people who was ready and ready didn't understand that, and they may
Well,
never understand it.
it's just because why it is you have all those schools now that I mean, I drive sometimes to go down to Pinal, and I pass some of the buildings that are not. I pass every day. I come down to DB to come to my home, and I look at the building on the left hand side where there's a recreational ground that it has grown up and has so much bush and whatever it is. Why? I mean, for God's sake, why these things could not be maintained? You know?
Doc, I mean, I saw this guy called Stark running around the country, but I would have liked to see more of our young people gotten involved in taking an interest and taking some footage. You know what trouble I get for people just to get the volunteers to correspond with me to feed the information, to even use their phone.
Yeah.
I mean, I am disappointed in that aspect of things, but
Yeah.
hopefully, I really want to see we build such a strong volunteer team of people, and consciousness of why we want to volunteer. I mean, there's opportunity in volunteering because you get experience. You get all this big degree and you go to take a job and you have no experience in doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The most expensive I have is making roti at home.
Well,
Well,
I hope that at least I mean I'm like everybody else in Trinidad right now. I'm hoping, I'm praying that I know it's gonna take some time. So I'm not pushing it. I don't really. I've made a decision a couple of nights ago not to interfere with anybody. Don't text anybody. Don't even send
No, 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 no,
a happy
no, but
Mother's Day to anybody, because I don't want people to feel that we bothering them or anything. I get the impression that we are going to be they're going to feel that we just bugging them. If you send somebody hey, how you going, what's up with you, it's almost like if
well,
so
yeah, well,
I'm not going to do it again.
I
Yeah.
ain't looking for a job. Like I say, I'm happy with my 10
Yeah.
days right here in New Jersey,
Yeah.
and I want to see certain things upgraded. I worked with this government for it to get
Yeah.
into
I,
power.
I
I
i'm
worked
happy i'm happy
tirelessly.
to work and lend my support in any way. That's good.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we got involved because we want to see the improvement. I want to
Yeah.
be able to come to Trinidad. I know there's an incident and we can get effective response. The communication is there, the infrastructure is built there.
Yeah.
We are too much of a rich country, or
Yeah.
too much of an educated people to be in the stone age of things when it comes to emergency response.
Yeah.
And we putting people in position for party with party card, and not having the capabilities. We have seen that happen too many times. We have seen that happen with the oil industry, with Mr. Manning putting people there, holding people petrol sing and all this kind of thing, and move the best people. We've seen in Mount Hope, they move all the best people who were doing the jobs there and put
Yeah.
people because of party card and other reasons and not competence,
Yeah.
and no concern. They're not concerned about service delivery. No, they're
uh,
concerned about what they could get.
Yeah.
Everybody that's concerned about what they could get, and they're not concerned about service delivery at all.
you
Yeah, well, I
see,
think that
Gary,
I'm glad that the honorable prime minister. I'm happy about the team that she has selected. I myself, I feel
So
that
she has the right
yes,
intentions,
I think
but
it's
I'm
going
just
to
saying
be
how the
good.
thing operates.
Yeah, I'm confident that I'm seeing the people, and I'm seeing their passion and and the drive, to try to improve things. So I'm patient. I'm a bit eager. I mean, I'm anxious and I'm maybe overly eager.
But
So I
no,
have to
because
tone that a bit.
I understand how you feel,
Yeah,
but what I'm saying to you,
yeah,
the things that we speaking about
yeah.
is absolutely necessary to get assembled as quick as
Yeah, well,
possible.
I think business continuity planning and emergency response, the national response framework. I think it's important. I think that's something that needs to be done. As Mr. Singer has been saying, you have to concentrate on the economy, concentrate on the children's hospital, the children's authority. All of these things are good, but I think you look at your balance scorecard, you look at your whole dashboard, and try to make sure that
Yeah,
you have your
that
balance.
is
Yeah,
absolutely necessary because
yeah,
I mean, your capability to respond to getting hit by something, that is unexpected,
yeah,
and how you handle it is going to
yeah,
show up your government.
yeah,
They're going to
yeah.
say you make all this
Correct.
talk.
Yeah,
Correct.
risk. Yeah, see, that's your risk. You identify
Enter-
all your
en-
risks.
Mm,
Enterprise
yeah.
risk
Correct.
management has
Yeah,
not been
Yeah,
maintained.
yeah,
mismanagement. I am big
yeah,
on that. Prevention,
yeah,
risk management,
yeah. So,
Enterprise, wide scale,
yes,
basic.
and the readiness to
and
response.
you see
Now,
the
we lost him,
I
Dr.
think
Rambo.
so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So somehow he dropped off. Maybe his phone went dead or something like that.
I
But
hope it-
Mr. Singh, hoping that he joins back soon. We
yeah,
saw
what
a
I
young
was,
lady. Go ahead.
what I didn't want to interrupt him when he was speaking, so I let him speak.
Yeah,
But
yeah. No, I want you to say what you have before you lose that thought. So go ahead.
right, so no, the thing about command in my university, my first university here in the US, my first class, they teach us communication, command, and control. It's called CQ. And it was a military jargon that was adopted in business school. The first thing in my MBA program, and I don't know, the guy who taught me was from the Air Force. He was a general. I was in George Washington University. He was at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. And he was my first professor. I never forget CQ. And I was doing management information systems, how information flows through a department, through government, through an organization. Anyhow, it's all about information flows, management information systems. And his thing was communication, command, and control. I didn't hear Doc speak anything much about communication, but that's the first one you have to touch. And that is the 911 number that will control everything. Who cares? You stick these numbers in your fridge, or 611, 211, you don't want to remember all these things. 666, blah, blah, blah. One number. Everything has to be routed through one number, 911. It's an emergency.
it's part of it,
So,
yeah.
are you back on?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Singh.
Yeah. You just have to fix your camera. Close your camera.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, if you could come here. Yeah.
Nice. As I said, my first class in my MBA program in George Washington University was CCC.
Yeah.
Communication, Command, and Control.
All right.
I was doing management information systems. This is how information flows through an organization, flows through government, flows through a business enterprise, anything.
Yes.
First thing you have to communicate.
Yeah.
And I heard you talking a lot about command and control.
Yeah.
But the first one is the communication side. And I was just telling Gary that 911 number, that should be the controlling number across the board.
Yes.
Let them route it now to wherever it has to go.
Correct.
Tobago is 211.
Yes, correct.
It's the same. Don't have 6 and 7 numbers where you have to confuse people, and in that time of panic, you don't know which one is which.
Correct.
And
Yes.
not
But
only that,
I don't know how ready are we
we are
for
ready.
building out
Listen,
for an infrastructure like that?
In 2015, when the People's Partnership left government, we were going to Central Tenders Board, right, to tender out, right, for to tender a provider to provide us with that. We had already stood up. Gary Griffith and was part of that. We stood up a 911 call center. In fact, we started to fill that center, and the concept was,
But the
yeah.
infrastructure is built already?
Well, it was there, and I spoke to Gary. Somebody I was speaking to the other day, from ODPM, and they told me that that they're not sure whether or not all of those computers and all those sort of things that we had at the 911 center is still there, or where
They
it
must
is
have
and
looted
what's
the
been used
Sadikoba
for.
Hospital.
So we're not sure, but no, the infrastructure was there, and we had already started to phase in the 911. It wasn't what we had envisaged in the original plan of the NOC concept. It was changed a bit, right? But the point about it is that we were getting it, and we were happy, to go. In fact, there was some heated exchanges with myself and the director of the 911, right, with regard to what the concept was. And the fact is that they wanted to do everything and have the players on board. And we were trying to say that in the age of communication now, there is no need to have the ambulance system in the 911 center. What you had to have was the capability to dispatch that call to the
Correct.
existing 811 center, which the ambulance, they have all their people there. So
When
once
the
yeah.
ambulance can be out of the hospital, can be out of
No,
the fire
well, no,
station.
the ambulance call center exists, right?
Yeah.
Already, they have their people inside their
Okay,
building,
okay,
and
okay. So
yeah,
what you're saying is to link it.
right. That's
Yeah.
correct. The 511 existed. That was for ODPM, and it wasn't a call center ODPM had. It was a customer care center. There was a difference.
Yeah.
Because you see now, when you call and you say that you're seeing water coming up in your river, when you call for a 911 crime, right, you go to police. Remember, the operator will start asking you questions and tell you, okay, blah, 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 blah. There is a direct communication between the operator and trying to guide you through your emergency, right? So there's a customer feedback. In disaster management now, somebody will call you back the next day and say, did you get assistance? You know what I mean? Did you? So you close the case and you see, well, that's where you can report back to the government. Out of the 100 calls that we got last night, right, 100 were dealt with, or 90 was dealt with, or 80 was dealt with. You know what I mean? So the government begins to see solid performance, a key performance indicator, right? So that's why the ODPM now, because it's a public safety. ODPM is not really a disaster management or disaster preparedness organization. It's almost like a public safety organization. You know what I mean? Where you're looking at something that you try to prevent. In other words, when we try to preach to the nation, you don't give a man a wheelchair, right, after the injury, after the disaster, right? You have to go into the community before and give the man his wheelchair before the disaster occurs. You understand what I'm saying? So that man can save his life. The concept was, ODPM is a responding agency. If we don't respond, we mitigate the impact of a disaster, right? So you give the people the wheelchair before the disaster strikes. That is the concept of ODPM.
So the defense force is the response. Is
The
the
defense,
response?
well, actually, right. What
In,
happens now is when you have search and rescue, right? It will be first of all the fire services, right? And then after the defense force and the military will come in all the divisions, Air Guard, Coast Guard, all of those, they are trained in search and rescue, right? As that part of their responsibility. So once you have a major disaster, or even a limited disaster linked to a municipality, right? You have that first line, that first responder, right? That is your fire services. The police don't do too much of the work except control the traffic and law
yeah.
and whatever. But the most important thing is the fire services and the military, right? So once they do their search and rescue and thing, then you have the other second line responders coming in, right? Like T and Tech and the
Yeah, yeah,
TSTTs,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
they will
yeah,
come
yeah,
in now to support the WASAs and things to fix the lines. And so that
yeah.
comes in. They are not first responders. They have to stay away from when the search and rescue is going on, because they could get killed too. They're not trained in that. You see?
Yeah.
So that is how it operates, and it operates in a protocol, and it's supposed to work in a way that it's supposed to work. You understand?
So what
So
I want to see now is what is necessary here is local government have to have a certain amount of people trained, and the local
right,
government has to institute the volunteer training program
right.
in collaboration with ODPM and the other
And
resources.
see, you're preaching there. You're preaching, because I come back to the human body, right? The most important unit of resiliency in a human body is the cell. One single cell, right? The cell in a nation is your household.
Yeah,
So the
but what I've
resiliency,
seen done is they frustrate the people who are interested. You
yeah,
know,
the resiliency of the nation is really based on the household itself, the individual in the house.
Mhm.
So what you're talking about, those community-based tools, right, is actually building resiliency at the home level, and that is the power of the strength of the process. Now, this is what I think the concept was with the last government, the PNM government, where they knew that building resiliency at the house level was important because it has the bigger win there. It has the, when you look at the value.
I was pushing
Yeah,
that with them a lot, you know. I wasn't
right.
playing
Yeah,
politics.
when you
I'd
look at the
shared a lot of
value,
that ideas.
it has the biggest value. But the problem now here is where your brain, right?
Yeah, after
Yeah,
David was Captain Wint, right? And I
right,
was in
correct.
communication with him.
Yes, yes. So the thing about it is that you must have that 24-hour situation awareness by the brain, but your cells have to be resilient enough to not need the brain in 9 times of the time. So what you have, what is called, when you have a disaster, you have what is called a scaling up, right, of your response. So when you scale up your response, when you use your call center, your 911 call center, and you begin, your 911 call center becomes your clearinghouse, right? What it
Okay.
now does, it actually collects all your calls, so you know the nature of the impact, right? So right away now, if you're getting 150 calls only from Shagonas, then 1,000 calls from Shagonas, right? You understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Although the whole country was hit by the earthquake, but all your calls are coming in from Shagonas. When you look at your picture now, you see, okay, 100 calls from Mayaro, 500 calls from this, right? One call from Diego Martin, and that's a school with 100 children. Where are you going to send your resources? You understand what I'm saying? So right away now, your military sitting down there with all their whatever it is, your planes and your boats and everything, and they have to wait and say, well, where you want me? They just run around with the trucks to see where the disaster is, and this is why you need to have that NOC. You're not going to have it with 14 municipalities not knowing where the other one, what is happening with the other one. You understand? So that is why I'm surprised that we didn't see that evolution of the 911 center, right? Where you talked about, Mr. Singh. Is basic common sense, as you say, Gary. You have to your cell has to communicate with your brain, but at the same time, your cell has to have the ability to survive by itself without even going to the brain.
Correct.
You
Yeah,
see?
all this is common sense. We didn't get to the scientific yet. We
Correct.
didn't touch science, we come close to that yet. This is the common sense level of thing.
Yes,
So
yes,
what I
yes.
want to see also is that we decentralize a lot of resources, including the military and the Coast Guard,
Right,
right?
and that is
So
the scale up.
Komodo and
That's the scale up.
Chagarmas can't be the two only place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you see what happened when David, when the guy lost his, when he had to leave the job, right? He said there was no disaster. They didn't the people who were suffering was
He said
didn't
what
have a
was
disaster.
happening is no biggie. It was no biggie for he.
Right. So here it is, and this is where the concept.
And that is under breath where people under 5, 6 feet of water in some place already, yeah?
Correct. You see, this is why people don't understand words, right? Disaster is a dangerous word, right? If I could have a disaster in a household, but it's not a disaster for the village. I could have a disaster in a village, but it's not a disaster for the municipality. I could have a disaster in one municipality, but it's not a disaster for the other adjacent municipalities. So this is why we talked about scaling up, right? If something is happening in the Pinaldebe municipality and they are overwhelmed, it might be a disaster for them. It might be a disaster for some of the communities in that municipality. But if they have the resources and they are able to tap the resources of the adjacent municipalities, then
Right.
Central
Talparo
Command,
supposed to be able
yeah,
to back
right.
him up.
That's what I'm saying. So Central Command, ODPM, who have their national resources there, right? Bilateral, multilateral warehouses with everything in it. You know what I mean? The ability to get, blue waters to send down people and this to send down trucks and things, you know what I mean? TCL to send down. You're holding that there. Because what you're doing is now you're seeing the ability of the local municipalities to scale up. So your ability to manage a national disaster is better, right, than to be overwhelmed. Because when you have a national disaster, you'll have 14 municipalities and Tobago to deal with. You understand? So you don't want to be deploying resources when you get most of your calls just from Pinaldebe, if you know what I mean, and just from one village. So this is how it works. This is the concept of how you respond. You know what I mean? This is what was taught to me by FEMA, was taught to me by the Department of Defense when I was sent by the US military, right, through the embassy to go to Washington. And they trained me in catastrophic events for 1 week, right, at one of the barracks in the deport. I had an A1 visa for that week. right? For a whole year because of that. And I had that training there. Where 1 week we went. Department of Defense was my they had my training, and it was
DOD,
for other
yes.
people, right? So
Mhm.
that's where a lot of what I'm talking about here in terms of the prime directive for POTUS and all of those things were given to me because it was preparing Trinidad and Tobago for a catastrophic emergency, right? This was training that was given to me by drills, lectures, whatever it is, and I came back to the country, and basically this is basic why I'm talking the way I'm talking, because we had a lot of training, you
Well, I'm
know.
happy you got exposed to the training, but that for me is common sense 101 with Gary in his brain.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you know, Doc, and you're thinking the way that I'm thinking, and I mean, I'm eager just as you to see these things implemented and put in place. You know.
yeah. Well, as I said, the reason why I kind of engaged a bit today was because we felt a little shake, and the thing about it is that we will continue, and I was just saying when I felt the shake, I wonder if my neighbor they have generator support and
Contingency
and
planning. Yes.
contingency planning, because the prime minister indicated a couple of days ago that
Yeah.
she will be working from here. So did they put things in place? You know what I mean? And things like power supply is very important for the head of government.
Generators. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's an important thing, because here you have a head of government. You can't have a house going blackout if there's even a local interruption of power supply in the area. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I can't remember if it is in place and whatnot. If they personally had a generator, but of course this is now a head of
Well,
government. So
you could speak to a certain guy. I won't say who it is. Anyway,
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, I know. As
so
I said, I don't
definitely,
want to.
I want to
Yeah,
keep.
it's not my
Yeah, I want to
responsibility. Yeah,
keep.
I am just
Well,
stating that
it's
Yeah,
not irresponsible as we concerned. No, what I'm saying
yeah,
to you is, I want to keep the education on the disaster thing going, so
yeah,
also that we kind of get the people in sync to where we're thinking.
yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, the rainy season going to have its impact by
Yeah,
next month as we
yeah.
go along. So
Correct.
these things have to be done. I was mentioning the financial part of it, but
Yeah.
certain things, Doc, has to be ongoing concurrently.
Yes.
That's kind of do okay, going to do the balance sheet side of the economy and forget the health side or forget the ODPM side.
Yes.
Certain things, low hanging fruits which you can pick right away has to be done
Yes.
concurrently with that's why in ministers and the parliamentary secretaries and so on had to be working 24/7
Yeah.
in this round, at least for
Yeah.
the first 3 months or so. Because if you go at your normal pace,
Yeah.
it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
Delivery, customer service, service level agreements,
Yeah.
continuity in the operations, all of these things going to suffer.
I think maybe they would have had these meetings before they started. I don't know, and maybe in cabinet that would be some of the discussions they would have been having in a broader sense. To look at all the different ministries and what they bring to the table, and hopefully prioritize based on that discussion. What was told to us on Friday. So, I mean, we are hoping that is happening, and if there is any way that we could input our conversation, in this regard. I mean, I'll be happy to
Yeah.
that they would at least hear it, or somebody will tell them, and but I'm positive that
Doc,
they would have, because
I'm hoping that you get an hearing soon in that because we really need to put these things in place.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
I
right,
mean,
gentlemen.
I would love to see
Yeah.
the national response framework. I mean, I was looking for it, and I haven't seen an updated version on any one of the websites. I typed it in on Google. I'm not seeing it coming up. I didn't see it on the ODPM website. I don't know if it is there, and I'm not searching properly. But the National Response Framework is a very important document when it comes to emergency response, and I know for a fact it was drafted. I remember you talked about me, Colonel Wint, Captain Wint, sorry, and I know that he had called me once when I had left about it, and I did indicate to him that we had drafted a national response framework, and I think he was working on it. So I'm not sure at what level, but you see, just having the document there and not actually, you see, for COVID, when COVID-19 struck the country, it was to me evidence that the national response framework did not work, and it was non-existent. The
Well,
COVID, the
even
yeah,
Captain Wint had good intentions, and I
yeah.
fed
I
him a
mean,
lot of
he
information
was
and
one
ideas.
of my guys. I mean, I
Yeah,
left
I
him
sent
there,
him a
and
lot of things. Yeah,
yeah,
and he was interested, but I
yeah.
don't think he got very
I'm
far.
not sure
Good.
what happened with him, but I think the fact that the COVID-19, when we looked at how it was operating in terms of the management and control of it, it was clear that there was no national response framework, because we were asking for, what was the actual COVID management team. All we were seeing was really a group of doctors and the epidemiologists coming and making statements on a regular basis by a thing, but we were not hearing what was the overall planning of the pandemic. There is supposed to be a pandemic plan, a national pandemic plan, right? And that was created in the ODPM in 2012. It was actually there before I came in 2011. But what we did is we had upgraded it. Remember, I told you I was in Geneva working on all of this, and we had actually forecasted a major pandemic, and it happened within my lifetime. And we actually saw the information, looked at all the probabilities, looked at all the models that were happening, and that was when we developed the Sendai strategy. When we were developing the scorecard, the dashboard, they moved me to a meeting in Geneva with WHO, the University of Oxford, one of the universities in Australia. We had a team that was working on it, and they identified that there was going to be a pandemic. And this was actually 2014, I think, was 2015, right? And it was early 2014 or late 2013, I think. And we knew that it was going to happen, you see. So it was just a matter of time. So the fact that COVID-19 did not have that collaboration, I mean, it wasn't visible. I don't know if they had the pandemic team, but there is a protocol that has to be followed when there's a pandemic. And we were not seeing that multi-sectoral collaboration with key agencies, right? That was happening at the time. You know what I mean? So
There's gonna
I'm
be
not sure if it's
a
operational.
investigation, right? There's gonna be an
Well, I mean,
investigation
I'm
on
hoping that
the.
there is an audit, that will be conducted to see how it was managed, because it's not just about the death; it's about the whole process of the a national pandemic plan. When you have a pandemic or you have a disease that could be an endemic or pandemic affecting a country, you have to pull out from your shelves a national pandemic plan, a plan that you have, and in that plan, there's a national response framework which overrides the entire thing, where each sector, government and non-government, has a part to play in the response to that plan, right? From the caretaker that works in the local government cemeteries, right, to the man who runs the ice factory, right, to the truck driver, to the hearse, right, to the funeral agency, you know what I mean, to the guy who supplies the body bags. There's a multi-sectoral collaboration that has to come together, either virtually or physically, and plan a pandemic. You don't just see an epidemiologist and a doctor and coming up. It's not just a health emergency, it's a multi-sectoral. It affects the whole of the country, and therefore you have to have that approach. And this is what I'm talking about. And I didn't see it, so I'm not sure if those things were operational. You see, I never saw ODPM during the pandemic, as if that organization never existed. But that is the coordinating agency for public safety. You know what I
Well,
mean? That is the agency that,
Stuart
yeah.
Young was everything, and nothing happens, nothing
The,
blinks
the
without
Gary
Stuart Young.
Sobers, man. He was the Gary Sobers of everything.
Yeah. So I mean, this is why I'm saying that if there's an earthquake in Trinidad and Tobago now, crap will smoke with pipe.
Both of my damn lamps done blow. I need a light bulb, man. I forgot to tell you I need a light bulb. There's some light bulbs in there. You gave me one before.
Uh, you get up? Okay, Dr. Rambo?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, kind of mute his because he had some background noise there. He can come back on whenever he
Right.
is ready.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what rolls out, and we will continue the discussion.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm so, yeah, no problem.
Information, information and education. Like I say, I'm really grateful to have you on board,
Right.
and for as we could do some kind of education or training program, even here too,
Yeah.
about the local municipality handling and getting
Right.
the local volunteers. Like I said, I saw a lot of people interested, but this government never supported the idea.
But I'm not sure. You see,
And
like
Captain
you are
would,
looking at the you're looking. I'm not sure if they're hearing it, but you are looking at the feedback of this chat, and what sort of are not. We are not privy to see the any sort
no,
of questions or anybody
I mean,
asking anything like that.
on this
Yeah.
chat here, the YouTube chat, it's placed in the in YouTube. You can see it.
Right.
But hold on a
Okay.
second. Yeah, I'll probably feed some of it,
Yeah.
but yeah. So
But there are people who
uh,
are looking at it and responding
yeah,
or
yeah, and
could
plus
respond.
it is viewed. The program is viewed a lot after it even is
Right.
broadcast.
Right. 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 Okay, well, at least once you're having some people who are engaging, and if there are any feedback, like people would be asking any sort of questions, and then those are nice ways to engage, to see if we could we could see exactly if there are people who are interested in getting some answers as well, whether they be from the US or wherever. It's nice to see, but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that from what I'm seeing, I know the guys seem to be working very hard. And well, tomorrow is Monday again, a new week begins. So I guess things will begin to roll out. You know.
Yeah, so I could load the chat onto the screen also. Question
Yeah,
related. Me and Mr. Singh was answering some questions earlier.
yeah. Because
But
somebody
I
had asked
see.
me a question
I
once,
saw
and
a
yeah,
question roll
yeah,
across the screen just now, so that's
yeah,
good.
yeah. Good.
See, I just showed it up here. I just click on it. I could put the questions in up on the screen. This was in relating
Yeah,
to it.
like okay, and I think people talk
Are
about
you able to read
forex.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah.
I see. Yeah. So yes, and the thing about forex is we talk about with all of those things we talk about to implement, and we still need foreign exchange to do the things that a lot of one of the most important things that we have to understand as a nation is that quite a lot of the things in terms of building resiliency doesn't need money, it doesn't need foreign exchange, and that's why we have to when we define what mitigation is. You see, a lot of people have to understand there's something called a hazard, right? A hazard is something that could impact an individual, right? And that doesn't cause a disaster in that individual's life if you could deal with the hazard. So you might have an earthquake or a hurricane in the middle of the ocean where there's no boats and there's no people, and it could be a category 5, and it could be a 8.1 earthquake, and it doesn't affect anybody in that ocean. Even the tsunami doesn't go far, right? So because it's so far away from land, and that's not a disaster. You understand? So a hazard is basically what affects an individual, and when he's unable to cope with it, right? That's when it becomes a disaster. And if he can't cope with it, it's a disaster for him, but it's not necessarily a disaster for the house, and people can support him by taking him to a hospital or whatever. You know what I mean? And a disaster in a house collapses and burns down is a disaster for the family, but it's not a disaster for the neighborhood, who will chip in and give him some support and give him shelter and give him food and give him psychological support. You know what I mean? So disaster, that terminology, a lot of that resiliency building has happened since the dawn of man, from the caveman days to now. In other words, and we didn't have foreign exchange then, and we never dealt with money and whatever. We had trade in goods and stones and cattle and cow, and later on, money came on the scene. But the thing about it is that a lot of resiliency
We
building
were
and this
more of
country,
a close knit
right, is yeah,
community at those days
that's
in
right.
the early days. Yeah.
Mitigation is structural and non-structural. Structural is what is like building, is like moving, building dikes, and of course you need foreign exchange for those things. But you don't need foreign exchange for non-structural programs where you talk about going into a community and teaching them community emergency response training, CERT training, going into a community and setting up a set of communication networks like we did in Cuba, where you have a retired principal, a retired police officer, a retired teacher, a retired soldier. They all live in a community. You get a little radio, like a little small radio for them, and every
two-way
week or
radio,
two,
ham radios, all
right?
these things.
Yeah, they
But
communicate. That's
we
correct.
have to
They
really work on
communicate.
the ham radio system.
Right, they communicate with each other and they say, well, we are in charge of these 3 streets, right? We know, for example, that Stephen Ramrup is going for surgery next week, right? He has a problem with his foot. He's a diabetic and they might take off the foot. So right away, Ramrup becomes a vulnerable person. Right away, he becomes vulnerable. So if that street is prone to flooding, when the authorities, the search and rescue teams come like fire and thing and whatever, they try to move Stephen Ramrup to a shelter before the flood comes because they know he's there. That is how it works. That is how it works, and you don't need forex for that. So whilst we balance our scorecards, right, we look at all the things that are cropping up. When cabinet meets and all the ministers identify all the key areas where that is causing the problem, then we balance that. And of course, a lot of it will need foreign exchange. I agree. But there are quite a lot of things in terms of resiliency building, non-structural mitigation techniques, training people, drilling people that doesn't need foreign exchange. And for a nation to survive, a nation that survives a big impact, it's not the foreign exchange that helps them. It is that local ability to come together, that empathy, that empowerment, that ability to see your neighbor suffer and try to prevent them from suffering, the ability for you to provide shelter for someone who is actually vulnerable, the ability for you to know that there's a lady next door who just gave birth to her children and that she's vulnerable if something happens, that somebody just fell down and broke his hip and he's at home now after a stroke, that those are the people who, when something happens in a neighborhood, they are vulnerable, and you don't need foreign exchange for that. You need that community, and that is what Trinidad and Tobago is strong. We have that, but we just need to nurture that. We need to build that. We need to give people hope. We need to give them that ability to have that empathy, and that is resilience. And it has been
Um,
shown
you know,
scientifically that once you build that resilience, you will have a
yeah.
stronger nation to deal with any sort of catastrophe. You know?
Well,
You-
let's see how the local government minister gets things rolling, and we
Yeah.
can assist her with that because
Correct.
Dr. Ramup, your input is absolutely necessary
Absolutely, yeah.
in
And
aiding this
the
and
same thing,
executing it.
every go through the same thing in Miami Beach for the hurricane season.
Yes.
The drills, the hotels, and so on. Do
Yeah.
drills in case of the hurricanes, pending hurricanes, how you move out the gas, how you
Yeah.
move out the age and the differently able people who given priority to move to a higher ground or further inland and so on.
Yes.
Everywhere you go through the same thing here.
Yes.
And, it's like routine. So every different organization have their own disaster plan, but everything is done within the framework of the overall plan. So
That's
that's
correct. Yes.
that's how it is.
That's correct. There are certain concepts that we have to understand that are unique. For example, if you have a village that is prone to flooding, right? The people will identify the key triggers. They will know. They know that when they live next to the Woodland River there, that they
Yeah.
know that when that water reach that level, and they're looking at the rain and they're looking at the dog, they know it's gonna flood because once it passes that, they know it's gonna burst the banks and come in. These people, some of them who know will already have put in place things. They build their house with upper floors. They don't want to leave the village because the actual teaching is that, hey, listen, you have two things you can do. You can go now and drop some sand before it reaches that level and let them build their little sandbags with the sand. It's a community thing, right? Or if you have money, you can go and drop the sandbags for them already made, and then it expands when the water hits it. But if you don't have money, you just get your sand and you take it to the village, and you let the people come out and fill the sandbags. So what about the guy who lives down the street who is diabetic, who had a stroke? Could he fill his sandbag? And I think this is where the problem was, and this is where people die in a disaster. It's the vulnerable people die first. You understand? Not the fit ones. So when you as the corporation come and you drop your sandbags, your sand, and you say, okay, good, we're gonna give you guys sand, or you fill up all your bags, and if you all want to stay, this is what you do. This is the sandbag. If you don't want to stay, you have to get a brother, a friend, a neighbor who could keep you in a higher house. If you don't have that luxury, you'll have to go to a shelter, right? If you don't want to go to the shelter and you choose to stay at home, You'll be putting all of us at risk because the first responders is going to have to remove you in the event of a disaster. You will have to be removed first because you are putting us in that situation. Why am I not moving? Well, I'm not moving because you know what? This is an area where people will come in my house and take all my jewelry. They will take all my stuff. They will take everything because they thief here too bad, and I'm not moving. I stayed in my house. So if the flood come, you had to come for me if it is really bad. But the fellow with the stroke can't move. So listen to me. The state have to understand that that guy will have to move. So you have to bring the CPAP and the URP before the flood, not after the flood to clean up. Bring them before the flood and try to get that person with the stroke to higher ground and get the secure his place. So you can't get private security that costs money, but you have the military. There's a base right down in Laramie. And there are soldiers who are there sitting down, they're doing the programs, they actually have military drills. We're not fighting any war or anything. They have training in emergency. They can deploy a team now to come to the village, knowing that it will be flooding, and they can secure the area. Because you can't ask the police to do that. They're overwhelmed right now with crime. You understand? So this is how the local government have to be thinking. This is what the disaster management have to be doing. And this is the training that has to be done when you come in the community to tell them that conversation I just had, that has to be shared. That is what needs to be done.
You know, Doc, the way I see it, right, is that we should rehearse this thing like a fire drill, like how we do it here in the States,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where, you know, the information and training has to be conducted. So you understand the time frame with the
Yeah.
response, how long it takes you to do certain things,
Yeah.
and you know, and your route is planned out well. If you're going up Rocha Road and Rocha Road block, which is in its alternate, you know,
Yes. And that's another
They,
thing, Gary. That's
you
another
identify
thing.
the gaps. You
Yeah.
identify the gaps big
That's
time.
correct.
You see the
Yeah.
bottlenecking and so on.
That's another thing, and that just that simple information. I mean, you know, and I know, you know, and you hear there's a lot of rain in Toronto, right? Right away, you get a helicopter report that says, "Okay, guys, we can tell you you don't go and use the 401 right now. There's an accident right now at corner of so and so and so. We advise you to take alternate routes. If you go now, you can make a turn off at this intersection, and you know what I'm trying to say. And these are the things that
yeah, and
we,
we advance
yeah,
right now because we have the
yeah,
drones too.
that's what I'm saying. So we have to have that level of planning. It's just not going and cleaning up the people after and giving them a fridge and a stove and giving them a hamper and a pamper and going
No,
in the
no, 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 no.
dinghy.
Well,
I
we
not
want to
Yeah,
see,
like going in the
yeah, we want to see
dinghy.
some structure in place.
Right, going in the dinghy when it has the flood and taking pictures and going with the dinghy and going to their house and giving them some water. It's just not about that. That's part of it. The other part really is the ability now to tell people, hey guys, we have an 80% chance of flooding now, right? You have had floods here for the past 10 years. Listen, this thing is whether it come or not. The point about it is that we're telling you, try to make your plans right now. If you have a neighbor or a friend who could help. I went through that just now. I wouldn't repeat it, but basically, it is what has to be done. And the drones will go up now and say, okay, guys, in the event we have flooding in certain areas, don't go down there. This is where you will pass. And that technology exists, and it can be shared on radio, on television, via WhatsApp, through the local government apps, through the social apps, through the Rotary Club apps. This information is easy nowadays. You have TikTok, you have social media, Instagram. I mean, it's
Most people
so
on TikTok
easy.
right now, yeah. So you get the
You know,
multi-platform streaming,
yes,
and but we have to structure the things. We have to
yes,
put a plan of action in place, you know.
yeah.
So the community resilience is something
Avoid
we need.
going to the Pinal Rock Road right now because it's flooded between here and here. Kindly use alternative routes or delay in San Fernando. Don't go down there now if you're planning to go there because it'll take at least 2 or 3 hours before that water subsides. You know what I mean? These are the kind of information that has to be shared. And you know what is interesting is we have REACT and the Trinidad and Tobago Amateur Radio Association via HAM, and these people are very highly connected. When I was in ODPM at the time in 2011 to 2017, we had them on the table. We had them as part of our 24 situational awareness teams. And I will tell you, a lot of times we will get information from communities, accidents that occur, blackouts, flooding, and we will have them before anybody else knows. It was so good to have these ham radio people on board because we were getting pictures and everything back at the ODPM, and we had a grip on what was happening
But this is what
as
I
the
want to see.
situation
I
was
want to see this
evolving.
thing expanded. I want to see this thing
Yeah,
expanded to the local,
yeah,
various local communities.
and we seem to have lost that for some reason. So I think that then there obviously needs to be we need to improve. I said I'm making a categorical statement here that I mean I'm a bit scared that if an earthquake now hits Trinidad and Tobago, I don't think we will be ready enough to deal with it. Judging from when I left in 2017, I knew that we were better off then, but now looking at what happened in COVID-19, looking at what happened with the divers, it means that the key elements, right, that primary directive, that key elements of that national response framework in the event of any hazard affecting the country right now at a national level, I think we are at very, very high risk. And having just had a little shake here, right? I mean, that sort of jolted me into a little bit of worry. And that is why I'm a bit passionate in this conversation here this evening, tonight, sorry.
And I support the passion because I am thousands of miles away and I'm just as passionate as you. And it's something I've been trying to get going for years.
Yeah.
But you are physically there and we can all collaborate with each other. And
Yeah.
you know,
All right. Well, I think
thank you very
let's
much, Doc.
let's
Yeah.
hope that everything works out well. And I hope my guys, I hope our young, I hope our new ministers and parliamentary secretaries, I wish they have a good week, a very successful week, and let's see what this week brings.
And I hope on my end that they reach out to you sooner than later so that we are
Well,
that we are better organized.
yeah, I think that I mean, and nothing happens. People say nothing happens before it's time. So let's hope that it happens before it's time as soon as possible, because
Well,
I think
yeah.
the rainy season is coming. Things are happening. You know.
Well, we will remind them what resources are at their disposal. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very
Okay,
much,
guys.
Mr. Singh. You
All
you have
right.
any
Take care.
last
Have a
words
good
to
night.
add? All right,
Take
and good night,
care.
everybody. Doc, I'll be in touch with you.
All right, guys. Take care. Bye bye.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.